Right, I think we're live. Push one in the chat if anyone can hear me. All right, got a confirmation from the chat. Thank you for the confirmation. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 805, Geopolitics. Please hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust. There's a link in the chat pinned to the top. It's a Zoom link. If you want to join the panel, make sure you update your Zoom client before joining. There is a new Zoom update out from the other day. Right. Share my screen. I'm also joined by MOT. What's going on, MOT? Push one in the chat if you can see the screen as well. All right, let me get started. So this morning we were awoken by breaking news that the Wagner Group had made a pivoting turn on the battlefield to go into Moscow. Okay, they were in a city in Russia called Rostov, and they decided that they were going to go up to Moscow because of the dissatisfaction of what was happening on the battlefield. And Vladimir Putin, the president, decided that he was going to defend this, defend the capital, defend the state of Russia from what he considers to be treason. Let's go into this article from RT. Yeah, let's go into the article from RT and let's dissect what's going on here. We will defend our country from treason, Putin. Evgeny Prigozhin attempted a coup as a stab in the back and amid the Ukraine conflict, the Russian president has said. Let me zoom in here. The attempted insurrection by the chief of the Wagner private military company, Evgeny Prigozhin, amounts to a betrayal of Russia and its people. Russian President Vladimir Putin said in an address to the nation on Saturday morning. He also vowed that the country's law enforcement agencies will take decisive actions to restore order. In a televised speech, Putin appealed to Russian service members and those who have been drawn into the criminal gamble by deceit or threats without naming Prigozhin in particular. He noted that Moscow is engaged in a historic struggle to safeguard its future while repelling aggression from neo-Nazis and their masters in the West. Quote, we are fighting for the lives and safety of our people, for our sovereignty and independence, for the right to be and remain Russia, the president said, urging fellow citizens to join forces and put aside all the divisions that could be exploited by foreign adversaries. Against this backdrop, Russia's armed forces and other government agencies have received the necessary orders, Putin said, also pointing out that anti-terrorist measures have been introduced in Moscow. Moscow region, and a number of other areas. He also noted that decisive actions will be taken to stabilize the situation in Rostov-on-Don in southern Russia. Earlier in the day, several media outlets shared clips of tanks moving around the city with unidentified soldiers patrolling the streets. The Russian president also urged those being drawn into the insurrection to make the only right choice and stop taking part in criminal actions. On Friday, Prigozhin accused the Russian Defense Ministry of launching a deadly missile strike on a Wagner Group camp, vowing retaliation. The ministry, however, dismissed the allegation, describing it as information provocation. The Russian authorities later said they had opened a criminal investigation into the Wagner chief for allegedly calling for an armed rebellion. Now, this is interesting, right? In the United States, January 6th of 2021, we had thousands of people try to storm the Capitol. And for whatever reason, there's an unwillingness to classify these people as traitors or treasonous to the state itself. But in Moscow, if you try something similar to that, you're considered to be a traitor to the nation itself and to be charged with treason. Okay. Now, here's the kind of the backstory on a lot of this stuff. The Wagner Group feels that they have not been supplied with sufficient resources on the battlefield in Bakhmut and several other areas. Lack of weapons, lack of ammunition, lack of food, lack of resources, communication, and everything else, and battlefield strategy as well. They're just told to go over there and take several villages and cities and no real strategy behind it, whether or not they're going to hold it or they're going to move on or they're going to have enough resources to back them up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That being said, the Russian Defense Ministry wants Wagner to actually sign a new contract. And these guys are saying, no, we will not sign a new contract, until we get some clarity as to what's going on here. And so earlier this week, allegedly their camp was bombed, like it says in the article. Who did it? We don't know. And why they did it, I don't know. A lot of speculation that the Wagner Group actually went out and shot down a Russian Mi-35 helicopter as well, I think a couple of days ago. What's going on? I don't really get it. Allegedly, the Wagner Group Prigozhin is actually working with foreign sources, such as NATO, such as Western groups to actually be funded because they're looking for more money. Now, here's the dilemma I have is that they consider anybody who are considered to be mercenaries to be treasonous. But this is interesting because mercenaries are not necessarily, they're not a conscripted military in that fashion. They're just hired guns. How can they be treasonous if they're being paid to do whatever it is that they're doing? They're not really a part of the military branch. So who are they really treasonous to? I find this to be interesting because in the United States, it's the opposite, right? The Proud Boys are not considered to be treasonous, right? The Oath Keepers are not considered to be treasonous.
Not at all.
5%ers, 3%ers, whatever you want to call them, they're not considered to be treasonous. I find these allegations to be very, very interesting. But Wagner has 25 to 30,000 soldiers on its or mercenaries on its side. That's a considerable military. I don't care where you go. And they're all armed too. And they all pretty much trained and they're battlefield ready. And so for them to decide that they were going to march their way up to Moscow, which is about an hour away, that's a pretty risky move. I don't think that this guy really thought this out. He's Putin's homeboy. Okay, this is a guy who was Putin's chef. He cooked for Putin. They know each other very well, very, very much, very deep relationship. So why he's out there, I mean, he's a guy who cooks. I don't know. Why isn't he flipping hamburgers at McDonald's in Moscow somewhere? I don't know. But for whatever reason, he's out there with him. I guess he's charismatic enough to really command groups of men. But when you really think about this, it's like, who's really pulling the strings here? Because if they're so dissatisfied with the Kremlin that they would actually decide that they're going to march their way up there to go, overthrow the people in power. It's a lot of moving pieces. MOT, what do you have on this?
Yeah, well, I think this is a stage coup to see who's actually going to jump first, and all these people are going to be killed once they do jump. I don't buy this Cook guy was just sitting around. It's kind of like Bin Laden's driver, sitting around waiting for his perfect opportunity to overthrow the big guy. Like, dude, I watched every Frontline documentary on Putin that they've ever done. None of this stuff makes any sense to anybody in the intelligence community. I think this is a true false flag operation. Like what the right wing is claiming here, this is the false flag operation that you need to be worried about. At the end of the day, a guy who commanded that type of control, I get the financial piece. It was always going to be a financial piece for people to be like, look, we're losing too much money over this war thing. He needs a way out. We can stage a coup or whatever, but it doesn't make any sense for people who know anything about Russia. These people are not on TV speaking. They're not on TV talking. You don't have Condoleezza Rice on TV talking about this actual issue. The foremost expert on Russia in the entire country and speak Russian. She's not on TV anywhere. So I think this is a staged event. Because I don't think that this guy is just going to be, oh, he fled the country. Is he in the country? It's like, you've already known, guy is trained. You're never going to find out his locations and all that kind of other stuff. I don't know what to think of this. I mean, we woke up to this. This was time. We woke up to facts on the ground is XYZ happened. I think we need to wait. I think they want weapons, money for weapons for what? I mean, we knew we was in contact with England and France and all these people during the Civil War. People in England wanted to side with the Confederacy.
Yep.
Right?
French too.
Yes, they did. Both of them did. And before they set sail and sent people over here, they wanted to see how things were quote unquote going to go over here before they sent actual support. And their support wouldn't have actually done a bit of good because they would have been sailing into the ports. I mean, they would have tried to make it to Virginia, but they never would have made it. They would have been caught off guard and actually out of there. And this is what this is. You're not going to be able to be out in front, actually define Vladimir Putin out in front without no type of serious consequences. I think this is a staged event. I think this is a stage coup to potentially get this guy out of the situation that he put himself in, but I just don't buy it. I don't buy it. Period. I don't buy it at all.
Let's take a look at TASS. Not TASS exclusives, but TASS News Agency.
Oh man, I was just going to say, man, like TASS went over there and started fighting people. What's going on, man?
It's kind of like in 2008 when Russia went to war with Georgia. A lot of people in Atlanta were like, "Oh, we're all gonna die," So that. All right, this is from TASS. Quarters aim to destabilize Russia foreign ministry. The foreign ministry expressed the certainty that in the near future, that situation will be resolved in a way worthy of the ages-old wisdom of the Russian people and the Russian state. The plotters' adventurous aspirations are aimed at destabilizing Russia, and this plays into the hands of its external enemies, the Russian Foreign Ministry said in the connection with the current domestic political situation. Quote, the plotters' adventurous aspirations are essentially aimed at destabilizing the situation in Russia, destroying our unity, and undermining Russia's efforts to reliably ensure international security. The foreign ministry said the mutiny plays into the hands of Russia's external enemies. The attempted armed mutiny in our country has aroused strong disapproval in Russian society, which firmly supports President Vladimir Putin, the foreign ministry said. We warn the Western countries against the slightest attempts to use the internal situation in Russia for achieving their Russophobic aims. Such attempts are futile and evoke no support either in Russia or among soberly minded political forces abroad. The foreign ministry expressed the certainty that in the near future, the situation will be resolved in a way worthy of the ages-old wisdom of the Russian people and the Russian state, and that all goals and tasks of the special military operation will be achieved. Russia will continue its sovereign policy of ensuring its security, defending its values, strengthening its authority in the international arena, and creating a fair, multipolar world order. We appreciate the understanding of this high principle position by our allies and foreign partners, which we are already feeling in full right now, the foreign ministry said. So where we are right now is that Wagner has already turned its troops around and its convoy around and have gone right back into Rostov, and they're actually leaving Russia now. They're actually going into Belarus. The Belarusian president struck a deal with Moscow to actually have these guys, the Wagner group, stationed in Belarus for the time being. And so this has already been averted. I still think that it shows that there are a lot of chinks in the armor for the Russian government. When you know, historically speaking, if we go back to the 1980s, 36,000 Cuban troops were able to take down the South African military in a matter of a couple of years. So this is not, you know, out of the realm that, you know, Russia can't fight a war on two fronts. It's almost impossible. They just don't have the logistics for it. They can't fight Western Ukraine and internal insubordination within their state. You know, there's a lot of questions as to whether Vladimir Putin is really able to be up to the task to actually carry Russia forward within 2024, 2025. I think that there is some question about who will become the next leader of Russia. And I think that there was some internal discussion between the head of Prigozhin. I think that there was some discussion between he and some internal people that would say that they were going to dethrone Vladimir Putin. How legitimate?
Let's give you some historical relevance.
Okay.
It's like in the thickest of the Civil War, headquarters in Virginia, supply line in Vicksburg, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
Texas was very strong, but nowhere near Vicksburg or even further away from Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you face an actual invasion from Mexico and you face an invasion from the north, on top of all the other issues that is going on within the country itself? There's
Mm-hmm.
no way you can fight a war on all these kind of fronts. That's why I say it's kind of staged, because the type of power that they led us to believe that he had during these documentaries by Frontline, it doesn't seem to be any of that type of stuff during this right here. And I don't think 30,000 armed mercenaries, even if they're all special forces, can be able to do a march like that, be able to retreat, and people are okay with it. I mean, you're looking at what happened during like the Vietnam War here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
The rebuke of that by the general public. the spitting on soldiers and all that kind of other stuff. This is way different. Like it would be a more bloody of an actual rebuke from the Russian government if they was actually serious about this.
Mm-hmm.
Serious about the Arab Spring, how they tried to put people down. They put people down with ruthless means. Apparently,
Yeah.
Vladimir Putin had this same type of power within his country while those things was going on and punished people severely when those things were going on. So it doesn't make any sense unless you're trying to soft coup this dude out of power and over a 3 or 4 year time period with no fighting, be able to reinstall new people in Russia to do things while this dude is actually controlling things from behind the scenes, just to get the war over with, Ukraine over with faster. That's the only way I can see it. With everything that I'm looking at, without even revealing like classified source, that this is the only thing that I see at this point.
No, I think that's actually a good perspective. But I do think that the head of Wagner, Prigozhin, I think that he was actually angry. I mean, if you look at his clips on Telegram and some of the social media, he is pretty angry about the situation. But I don't put it past him that, as you know, some point some megalomania kicked in and he decided that he was going to do a U-turn and speed into Russia and decide that they were going to have a standoff, primarily because their soldiers are being, they're going through the meat grinder themselves because they're the ones at the front line. And so,
I mean, conscript is a Russian term. It's a Russian term by definition. And, when these people go out there, they shoot people when they go out there with ill-equipped armament against other people. They have a rear guard.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they have a strong rear guard. They force people into the battle that they don't want to be in. And once you decide that you want to leave the battle, they shoot your ass in the back. Leave you on the battlefield. Don't even bother burying you or telling anything about people in the country that your ass is even dead. They just know that you didn't come back. They don't even tell your family anything. So we're just in a position to where we just have to wait and see. And I don't agree with giving these people arms or armaments at all, period, for any reason. That's how we got the actual situation in other places where we're being shot at by M16A1s, where we shouldn't shooting at people with M16A2s. Where we were fighting Al Qaeda in one place where they were our enemy. Now that our allies in other places, you have to look it up to know what I'm talking about. Now we're being shot at by our own armaments, by people that were sold to them 2 and 3 years down the line when they shouldn't have access to any of that stuff, period.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think that I think Putin is going to leave power at some point in the next 24 months. I do think that
he has to for the Russian state to move forward. They're trying to find a way. They're trying to do a reverse bloodless coup.
Yeah.
That's what this sounds like. I have never seen anybody with that level of power, with that level of money, and that situation just turn around and just act like they're leaving. When none of this stuff makes any sense. It doesn't. But at the end of the day, I'm glad it's going this direction because in 24 months, this thing is going to be over within the first couple of months of the next presidency. Period. This is going to be over with, no matter who wins. This is going to be over with within the first half before the midterm of the next presidency, no matter who wins.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of compassion fatigue for Ukraine. A lot of folks on the ground and a lot of neighboring states don't really want to carry this on anymore because they can only absorb so many Ukrainians coming into their country, especially Poland, for that matter. I think they have
especially Poland. And there's a lot of people coming back from these conflicts in the United States. who are torn up too. White dudes went over there, thought it was gonna be some easy conflict that they came back, legs blown off, arm blown off, all types of other shit. Because you got into a conflict that you thought was easy, till your ass got over there, realized this was some real shit, and all of a sudden, you're fast tracked to the disability system, and now you're wheelchair bound. Like, so what war are you fighting? Oh, I went over to Ukraine. Why did you go over to Ukraine? Well, I can't talk about it. Fuck you mean you can't talk about it? Why were you over there? From Texas.
Yeah.
Didn't know about January 6th, but you over in Ukraine. Please explain it to us. Oh,
Actually,
well, I can't get into it. Oh, okay. All right, man.
Yeah, actually, a lot of people who escaped January 6th ended up in Ukraine, which is interesting.
A lot of them, that's why a lot of them didn't get charged. And I can say it out loud because that's declassified.
Yeah, I shouldn't say a lot. I should say the ones who were able to get away and go into the Ukrainian theater, Eastern European theater. I think that, those are the ones who were over there and made their way back in through Mexico.
Correct.
But to the point that I was making earlier that about Vladimir Putin stepping down, it's inevitable that he's going to step down. That's what Dmitry Medvedev is
Always was. That's why he takes so many positions throughout the years. He can always say he's stepping down and still running the show behind the scenes, still running the show even though he's in another country, still running the show even though he's wherever. It's like, that's what this whole not having a stable government shit is about. Okay, he tried this shit, it didn't work. Okay, all right, let's do a soft coup. A soft coup where people come out, march out here, do some other things, have some people shoot at them. Casualty reports you can't really trust because of it's being actually orchestrated by the government who's trying to get off the hook for the things that they're doing. How could you really trust any of these people? That's why I don't want M16A2s or F-16s being sent to the actual Russian government so that way they can be used in a different theater against U.S. troops somewhere else. Fuck these dudes. Your country, you fix it.
Well, they lost a lot of arms. U.S. and many of the NATO allies who ship arms over there. Stinger missiles are missing and javelins are missing.
Gone off the planet.
They lost a cache of missiles. A cache of weapons, and no one seems to know where they are. And so when you think about it, there's a lot of arms trafficking going on. Who knows if they've ended up in Africa? Who knows if they end up back in the United States? And
we let an arms trafficker go in exchange for a WNBA player.
Yeah.
Well, how do we know that's even playing out right now? With the connection that dude had in all types of countries over the past 20, 30 years. But that's just where we're at. I mean, like, this is a bloody and messy situation that's not going to get solved. And the only thing we could do is just be glad that this guy is, quote unquote, the look and the opposite of it, not in power. However, these people are on, man. Like, I don't know what else to do here. I mean, we seem to be the only adults in the room. We don't have intelligence people speaking and anybody. Like, I've watched a lot of this stuff, man. I don't see the people who's speaking about this stuff who should be. We don't have any professors who's Russian experts talking about. We don't have Congolese, right? We don't have any of these people who are experts on the situation talking. And that's what kind of led me to believe that this is some BS, soft core type of coup, reorg structure under a new thing. Oh, send us weapons. Oh, since you're not sending weapons, we're going to continue losing. Like, why the fuck would we send you like our highest grade weapons to a person who is inherently not on our side and never has been? Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense to ship arms over there and have them locked. I mean, the Russians have captured, a few American tanks, German tanks, French tanks. They're picking up American hardware. Not to say that, the Western militaries haven't picked up some of the Russian hardware too. I know they picked up a Pantsir.
All of
S1,
it. Yeah.
They picked up a Russian T90. I heard that's down there in Georgia right now being worked on, or Alabama. They're expecting that. And so there's a lot of moving pieces on the battlefield. Russia's going to have to stick this out for the long run because they don't have any other choice. But who else is going to back them up on this?
Nobody.
They have a pretty good arms industry. They can kind of crank out bullets and ammunition, for the foreseeable future. But I also think they went in there half cocked. I think that was a big mistake on their part. If you're going to do,
they thought it was going to be over very quickly, like the U.S. thought that Iraq was going to be over within a week. They got overhyped with the actual situation that went on within Kuwait with the Gulf War, with Colin Powell halfway planning this actual assault that actually happened within the actual Iraq and Afghanistan thing. Then they removed him after they had everything out of him. They knew he wouldn't sign on with everything else that they wanted to do. And he just got started. A legitimate guy got started, and everybody else kind of stayed after this thing was over. So that's what it is now. Like, the guy deeply trying to get out of this. Like, you don't have the armaments to fight weapons from the West, up-to-date weapons from the West, up-to-date weapons that are far more sophisticated than yours. From the West, you just don't have the ability to do that. This is always going to be a quote-unquote Mexican standoff, and you wasn't going to be able to win this. You were never going to be able to win this. You knew this before going in.
Well, the thing here is Russia's military is really set up for trench warfare, in terms of like World War I, World War II. They're not really set up for like super modern warfare, whereas United States are ready to fight, in the break of dawn or late in the night. They can fight at nighttime, but Russians are not really up to that task. Although they do have enough, heavy lift capability to drop, smart bombs and things like that. They haven't used it. Since the inception of the war, they haven't used it. So I find
they're not trying to create another Afghanistan situation where they got tons of bombs that they dropped in it. Like, dude, they're not trying to recreate that.
Yeah.
They're not trying to recreate that because they're trying to use the land that they get. But what happens when you don't get the land? You can't get the land. Like, you can't go and do all this butterfly mine stuff over there. You can't. It's modern area. Like, you can't drop this stuff everywhere. Because once you start killing your actual allies, then the war is really over. Really over. I mean, but you can sabotage and do all this stuff during like the Afghanistan conflict. But what happened when you wanted to use the land after it's over?
Right.
It's not a real good thing. Like, their military is not set up to fight the war that it is. Like, their military is set up to liquidate places, move forward. Liquidate places, move forward. They're not set up for long-term sabotage like the United States was. Like, the United States did the long-term sabotage thing in actual Vietnam.
Yeah.
Didn't work.
Yeah, with all the white phosphorus and Agent Orange and stuff like that.
Like Willie Pete and all that kind of stuff. It's like, dude, none of that stuff worked. They still reunited under a singular government. Right now, they're the new China. If you want things made and you don't want them made in China, all the people are going over to Vietnam to get their stuff made. 7 or 8 different places that are literally Alibabas that's ran by the government, not private organizations that can actually do things. Everybody over there is doing great, super socialized everything. But you don't notice if you've never been to Vietnam before, especially within the last 15 years. Those people are highly educated, highly doing things the proper way. They learn from, and most of those people have been educated in the West, and they go back over there and they make their stuff better. It's hard to fight a country who has weaponized everything from every other place to their own advantage. It's hard to fight somebody like that.
Right. We got JM on the panel. I assume his name is John Morant.
Hey, what's going on? No, this is Jay, usual Jay that comes on sometimes.
What's going on, bro?
Nothing much. Interesting discussion.
Yes, sir.
So just a question. I mean, I think I didn't hear completely what you were saying, Man of Tomorrow, about Russian military capabilities, but they did perform effectively in Syria, probably like a decade ago or so. And I think that was a surprise to many analysts.
2016.
Yeah. So it does appear that, you know, their military can hold up to.
I think the difference
or is quite adept at modern warfare.
I think the difference in Syria, Jay, is that they were fighting against insurgency, not necessarily a full-on military state, right? They you know, the apparatus of those ISIS and, you know, these other extremist groups. I think that's a little bit different because the warfare is a little bit unconventional. They don't really have tanks, and they kind of work from Toyota pickup trucks with technicals on the back. That's a little bit different because Russia really fought that from the air. They didn't really fight it from the ground, which is what I was saying earlier a few minutes ago, that why didn't the Russians just go full on into Ukraine and into Kiev in the same way? I mean, they did it, you know, in Syria, but I have to accept that those are two different types of battlefield. One's in the desert and one's on flat ground in Ukraine.
No. This is great. So given that you have up-to-date information on your actual battle strategy and plan, what do you think about that, sir?
Jay?
I'm sorry, was that a question?
Yes. Okay, now that you're up to date about the different battlefield conditions versus what you just came up here to say, what do you think about that, about the accurate representation of the battlefield in both places? Like, what do you have to say about that?
Yes, a fair point. I do remember, though, that the Islamic State, they had pretty modern warfare, if I can remember correctly, because they seized a lot of the hardware from the Iraq military.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Okay, I thought you were talking about the initial group in Syria, not necessarily the ones in Iraq.
If you remember, Israel was involved as well as the U.S., and it seemed like a whole mess. They were funding different groups, but there did seem to be advanced modern weaponry involved, and that's why Russia had to step in to save the Syrian regime, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they stepped in because they were the Syrian military were depleted. Because remember, a lot of those soldiers on the opposite side were former Syrian military themselves, and so they had pretty good understanding of the lay of the land, the environment itself, and like in some of the neighborhoods, because they did a lot of street fighting there too. And so that's when you had Hezbollah step in from Lebanon and really change the game there too, because they really changed the game on the ground, and the Russians changed it from the air. And so I think it's an amalgamation of different, you know, forces coming in at different sets of times. You know, Hezbollah was well trained and was actually played a significant role in backing up the Syrian military on the ground. Whereas the Russians, you know, they had a lot of technical equipment that can actually sniff out people on the ground, right? And so, you know, these AWAC planes that were flying around Syria were identifying a lot of the terrorists by their cell phones, the geolocation on their cell phones. And so that's when they were doing their strikes. And so I think that that's a different battlefield theater. I think that's a different theater of conflict that can't be transferred into Ukraine at all. Ukraine is flat land, it's cold, and then it gets muddy in the springtime. Your offenses are going to be different. You know, and you know, you have a lot of different forces inside Ukraine right now. We know there's Americans in there. I mean, that's a given. We know that there's a lot of NATO, you know, taking off their uniforms and they're inside there as well. I think Malcolm Nance has been pretty vocal about that, even though we can't really trust a lot of things he's saying. We do know that that is true. And so I think you have a lot of trained Western special forces inside Ukraine, giving the Russians the, you know, the fist in there. But I think the Russians went in there half cocked. I think that they went in there with 10% of their military capabilities and thought that they were going to have an easy victory, because Putin said back in 2020 that if we wanted Ukraine, we could take it in 2 weeks. Well, 2 weeks turns into 2 years, and then that's not really working out too well.
It's no different than George W. Bush talking about moving into Iraq. It's just the same blunder that they ran into for the same reason, same personnel issues, same nearly everything, except for that when it don't go good, you start to stage a coup for you to be able to get out of your mistake, and you can reorg under this stage coup. At the end of the day, there is no way that you can possibly think that this is going well for Russia, period. They just don't have the armaments. They don't have the manpower. They don't have the firepower. They don't have the military capability to do what they thought that they were going to be able to do that was easy. So people who actually think that this thing is actually anything else than what it is currently have to look at you sideways, man. 'Cause at the end of the day, Russia was never going to do a soft coup. There's no soft coup in Russia unless they want it to happen. If they're a kleptocracy, you can't have a soft coup in a kleptocracy. That doesn't work that way in a kleptocracy. You know what kleptocracy is?
Yeah, Jay's pretty familiar with what's going on.
All right, cool. So if you have a kleptocracy and you understand the history of the Russian forces itself, there is no way in the world that you think because you had a couple weeks or months that are hard that things are going to be able to just all of a sudden turn around and change. This is part of the planning phase of most people with intelligence organizations and everywhere else. This was never going to go well for them. This was not, it was set up to be a 2 or 3 month operation. It was never set up to be a 10 or 20-year occupation. Same thing with Iraq and Afghanistan. He just went through it again with this actual circumstance because everybody else had the same information. It was the same across the board. People knew exactly how this thing was going to end. But there was no reason for him to go out there and do any of this stuff in the shortfall. I mean, this soft coup thing is a way for him to get out of the responsibility of power by controlling this stuff through a puppet state anywhere else. Right. Okay, did you hear anything I said?
Who are you talking about?
Sir. All right. So did you hear anything that I was saying?
Yeah, I'm listening keenly. I just wanted to ask, who is he? Are you talking about Putin or the Wagner chief?
Putin. I'm only talking about Putin's interaction and his actual responses to things that are going on thus far.
Hey, what's up, guys? Yeah, I disagree with that. Yeah, this is all royalty. So here's the issue. What happened? This caught a lot of people off. Yeah.
Let this guy respond to what I just said because I was responding.
Okay, no problem.
Allow him to respond to what I just said.
Okay, no problem.
Well, I'm sorry. You want me to respond to the soft coup claim that you're making?
Yes.
Well, what I find interesting is that the Wagner chief actually never criticized Putin directly. My theory is that this may be a way for him to oust some of his leadership without directly criticizing them himself. Because the Wagner chief understands. One second.
Stop right here. You have to stop right here. That's why I called it a soft coup, because a coup is very bloody, very immediate, very upfront, and still out there. That's why I called it a soft coup. With everything that you've learned about Putin at this point, to actually do anything other than a hard military stance for power is a soft coup in definition. So everything that you're saying right now is supporting my point. So if you're going to
I'm not disagreeing with you. I don't know why you're being so aggressive. I'm not disagreeing with you.
No. So what I'm just saying that if, like, my position, this is a soft coup. If you agree, then just say you agree. If you disagree, then provide your own opinion. But what you can't do is just say that I disagree with you and then It didn't support my whole opinion. It didn't say that that's your opinion. So
Well,
I said
didn't
it
disagree
is,
with you.
sir.
I asked you a question.
I said that it was a soft coup. I know what a hard coup would look like for actual Russian means.
Yeah,
So
but
if you're
MOT
gonna
has to
say,
respond. He has to be able to respond. You cut him off mid-sentence.
yeah, okay, but I am cutting them off for a specific reason. So, do you think this is a soft coup or not a soft coup?
I do not.
So you think this is the hardest coup that it could be done under Russian means?
I don't think this is a coup. That's what I was trying to explain. That's why
Okay.
I mean, I'm not
Okay.
disagreeing
Okay.
with you. I'm just saying
You
something
don't think
different.
this is a coup? I think it is a soft coup. So, sir, please provide your evidence and actual opinion on why you think this is not a soft coup. I'll allow you to have the floor. So now that we know there's a distinction between my point of view and your point of view, my point of view is that this is a soft coup. Your actual opinion that it is not a soft coup. And okay, you can go ahead.
Thank you. So my main point was that the Wagner chief has not criticized Putin at all, only his subordinates. And I mean, I'm assuming when you say coup, you mean that Putin is going to be the target of the coup, soft or hard. But my point is the target here is his subordinates, not Putin himself, because the Wagner chief did not ever criticize Putin directly.
Right.
He made.
Oh, please go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I mean he made several claims about the tactics that were made and the effectivity of certain methods of invasion, but he never criticized Putin ever. Only subordinates, his defense chief, and several other people, but never Putin. So very interesting. If it was a coup, soft or hard, he would call out Putin. I would think.
No. You're misconstruing my point. There is a soft coup and there is a hard coup. When there are actual coup d'etat that happen in countries, they're very hard, and they are by the military. There is no whether it's soft or hard. It's whether it's a coup or whether it's not a coup. Like in the Russian situation, in the Russian theater, we know how coups happen in other countries. With somebody who has this level of power and stranglehold of power within that country, you have to define what a coup is and what a coup isn't. There is no if it's a coup or not. It is a coup. I say it's a soft coup. It is a reorg under somebody else. We're doing hardline things that actual Putin wanted to do over a standard of years. It's still a coup. It's just that things just look a lot different in a standard coup of other countries throughout history.
I don't think against coup is my question.
I don't think that's Jay's position. I think what Jay is saying is that he does not think it's a coup, and so he's not taking that position.
You don't think it's a coup at all?
No, not at all.
He's not taking the
soft
position.
or hard. I don't think it's a coup.
Yeah, he's not taking that position.
So you don't think it's a coup? So you don't think it's a coup at all?
Nope. And in fact, I would disagree with you looking at Russian history because the Tsar Nicholas stepped down without violence. He actually agreed to a power sharing agreement with the Duma before the Bolshevik Revolution. So even in Russia, I mean, there's different methods of power exchange and removal.
Let's go to Zoe Royalty. Zoe Royalty, what do you have on this?
Yeah, so what Jay said is correct. Prigozhin, who's the leader of the Wagner Group, he wanted when he made those videos and speeches, it was mostly targeting Shoigu, who's the defense minister, and Gerasimov, who was the theater commander in the war in Ukraine. And he's been having a feud with them for months now, especially Shoigu. Some of the things that Prigozhin said were kind of like asinine because he was complaining about Wagner didn't have enough artillery shells. Meanwhile, Wagner had like in the Battle of Bakhmut, they had like a 20-1 artillery, overmatch over the Ukrainians. So he kind of stretches the truth. But this, whether it's a coup or not, it was more of like he wanted a reshuffling in the way the Russian military was fighting the war, and this caught the Russians by surprise because Ukraine launched their southern summer
Offensive.
offensive in the Zaporozhye region, and it's been going
Mhm.
very poorly for them. Like it, because to give a little background, the Russians have been preparing for 9 months because they know the Ukrainians are going to attack there, and after mobilization, they built 5 lines of defense, and because they knew the Ukrainians were going to use their Leopard 2 tanks or whatever, and when the offensive started, the Ukrainians have not even reached the first line of defense. Every time they go on the attack, landmines, artillery, air support has really bogged them down. And there was a shift in the war because the Ukrainians literally didn't know what to do. But so this whole thing came out of nowhere because many Russians saying like we're actually making progress in the war, and then Wagner comes out and does this. But the main issue why this really exploded the way it did was that about 2 weeks ago, Wagner Prigozhin, who's the leader of Wagner, had a meeting with Putin, and basically the Russian military is doing a reshuffling. So they want all independent, like military organizations, to be under the Ministry of Defense to sign a contract. Prigozhin was like, no, because if Wagner signs that contract, they will lose their, independent status from the Russian military. So that's where this whole thing kind of started, because it's like the MOD, the Russian Ministry of Defense, saw Wagner as like, kind of operating outside of their control, then they didn't like that. And, Prigozhin really didn't like the way Gerasimov and Shoigu was basically running the war. But it's weird. They depend on the Russian Ministry of Defense for all their logistics and whatnot. But yeah, this whole thing, it was very bizarre, the way it ended. I ultimately think this is probably going to be the end of Wagner. They're probably going to be dissolved. They're just because the agreement is so weird that all criminal charges dropped against Prigozhin. He's probably going to end up in exile, or they're going to send him to maybe be in charge of Wagner operations in Africa. And another thing to keep in mind too, when all this was happening, a lot of Wagner, commanders went on social media and they're like, we don't know what's going on. Like they denounce Prigozhin. So this whole coup thing was it failed right from the start, because for a coup to happen, you need to have support from the military, support from the security forces. You need to have some political support. All the governors, all the politicians renounced him. The Russian military, all the generals, renounced him. Russian soldiers posted videos of them supporting Putin. So it kind of went nowhere. But
Okay, that's why I called it a soft coup. You made all the points that I made because it's a soft coup. If it was an actual hard coup, this dude would be nowhere. He would be on a plane or some type of left the country a year ago, maybe even 6 months ago. He'd be actually making decisions from somewhere else. I think we need to educate the actual people and the crowd about what a coup is, and especially with the amount of power that this guy claimed to have had and the amount of money that he claimed to have had and the control over the military that he claimed to have had before this actual event.
Yeah, but something happened before MOT, and so that's what something
I
happened
understand that.
Yeah, but something happened before, right? So we know that their soldiers were being killed by the official Russian military. So that's what his original gripe is about. And so he has a legitimate position to take in terms of, one, not getting enough resources, and two, suddenly his soldiers just start taking casualties on the battlefield from Russian MI helicopters. That's a concern for him.
Now they're trying to ask for actual resources from us when that's their actual stuff, and they should have planned this stuff from the first beginning. Like, I don't buy that this guy is even that much in control of things to where he can actually do the things that he said that he was going to do. It's either hard coup or soft coup.
When you say that,
soft.
When you say that guy, which guy? Who are you talking about?
The person who's taking over things from actual Russia right now? Who's trying to pull out? Who's trying to do other things? The guy, last name that you brought up.
Kazokin.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is simply that if this was a coup in a traditional sense, the actual guy would be the person who they could actually conducting the coup against would be nowhere, anywhere in power, wouldn't have any type of actual control over anything. This is why I said this is a soft coup. It's more of a reshuffling. Like I heard the word reshuffle by both of these people. That's why I say it was soft. Because when they say reshuffle, reorganization, everything else, this is guy that's not a reshuffle and reorganize type of guy. Putin is a guy that does everything top down. There is no reshuffle, no reorganization, no anything. These other people that you're actually talking about, I say it's a soft coup. I think that they're still working together. They're asking for American resources in their actual country, which is never going to come to them. That's why I say it is soft. It is actually hard. They would actually not even need our resources for anything. They just would have taken care of the job already. Because nobody, like most of the people, don't want the war to go on in the actual area, period. They wouldn't need our actual help with anything if they actually performed a coup. Or it would be some CIA op type stuff if they perform the coup efficiently and effectively. Like, I think this is a reorg. I don't think it's a coup. I think it's a soft reorg. I don't think it's a hard coup by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, it doesn't matter how you look at it, the amount of power, the amount of wealth that this guy had before this actual conflict is clearly not there during the conflict. He cost a lot of people a lot of money, a lot of it. And I just don't think that this guy came in and just actually took over things. I just and tried to make deals behind other people's back. I just don't think that's the case.
Who cost who a lot of money? What are you talking about?
Vladimir Putin cost the actual wealthy oligarchs within this country a lot of money with this actual conflict. So that's why I don't think it's a hard coup. If it was a hard coup, these people were costed the money that they were costed, they would have went in right away and took them out of power. I don't think that at this point, this conflict has went on for so long. The gasoline prices have actually recovered in the West. It kind of has recovered in Germany. Like all this actual leverage that he thought he had before, that ain't the leverage that he has now.
Mm-hmm.
So they're finding a way for him to actually exit this actual situation and be exiled more than it is a coup. That is my point.
I mean, in a sense, yes, like the leverage that he thought he had was gone. But the issue is that in Russia, the war is pretty popular, and they want for them. So in the beginning, the Russian people were against the war, but then now after they've seen, a lot of the Ukrainian, neo-Nazis, paraphernalia and all this other stuff, it brought up a lot of like hardening of like the Russian public. Like the Russian public is actually more hawkish than Putin. So they basically want this war to be finished through the end. That Ukraine is totally defeated. Um, I mean, when mobilization happened, after mobilization, more men went to join the Russian military because they felt like they need to defeat Ukraine, liberate the Donbass, and actually take more territory in the a historical Novorossiya area, like
I have a
Odessa,
question for you.
Kharkov, those areas. So I don't. The thing is, the war's going so far with this Ukrainian counteroffensive is going well because the Russians are on the defense. Ukraine is taking a lot of losses, so I think we have to watch to see what happens this winter, like or this upcoming NATO meeting, because the reason why Ukraine launched their counteroffensive was that if they made some gains with the NATO meeting happening in July 11th in Lithuania, they can secure more weapons. But if the offensive doesn't go well, then what happens? Does the West start to be like, okay, you guys got to negotiate. We can't keep doing this anymore. So um, we're at a turning point in the war, and the war is pretty popular in Russia. The Russian people, their hearts have hardened against Ukraine. In the beginning of the war, they were against it because they see Ukrainians as their brothers. But then after they see like, okay, why is there so many neo-Nazis in the Ukrainian military? Why are they wearing Nazi patches? This is kind of like what the hell? And why do they support Stefan Bandera, who collaborated with Hitler? And they see and Ukraine see him as like a Ukrainian national hero. So, and also a lot of events that happened. The attacks in Belgorod, the drones over Russia. It hardened a lot of Russians' hearts, and that's the thing with Russians. They're people that okay, you attacked us, now we want to totally destroy you. So I think it's the opposite. They just
Okay,
want
so
they feel
so
like
what
Putin
you're saying
is
is
holding
true.
back.
Why do they need conscripts other than people signing up for the military? That's my one question. If they need conscripts, do you know what a conscript is? Why do they need conscripts rather than people who are naturally signing up for the Russian military? If what you're
They didn't
saying
use
is
conscripts. They
100%,
used they mobilized men who had military experience. They didn't, conscript average Joe Schmo. The if you read the mobilization speech, it was basically they're gonna mobilize 300,000 men who have previous military experience. That was
does
it.
that sound like a natural, actual thing for people to do to join the Russian military?
Well, World War II was incredibly popular in the U.S. and they still had to
World
conscript
War
people.
II is a long time ago. We're talking about right now in Russia. Russia trying to go against Ukraine right now. Do you
I
think
think
it is a
historically,
popular idea?
I think historically that does have some relevance, in terms of.
Yeah, I can name a bunch of wars that were popular. They still have to conscript people
Yeah,
because popularity is
you
not
still have to script people.
enough.
But at the end of the
Civil
day,
War, they
they
had to.
don't want to be there, and they're forcing people to actually be there. I was in the military myself. Were you in the military?
No, but I'm just telling you the facts that what it is. They
Okay, so
mobilized 300,000 men who had previous military service. Then on top of that, more men
did
went
they
to
want to
join.
be there? I mean, did you know what they had to do to keep those people in that region? Did you know what they had to do to make sure that those people stay out there? Do you know any of those stories about any of that stuff? I mean,
come on, those stories.
It's not you going out there to fight. But let's say that we're talking about somebody else who has to go out there to fight, right? Do you know what they have to do to keep those quote unquote conscripts out there away from their actual family? People who actually
But the
don't
point is,
even
every
want to
war
fight
requires conscripts.
it doesn't.
And again,
Every war requires
these
conscripts.
are not conscripts. The conscripts is like, okay, we're gonna mobilize your average 18-year-old who has no combat experience, and we're gonna train them in 6 months, and we're gonna send them to the hot zone. No, these were guys who had previous military experience.
Previous
They
military
had previous
experience, and
they
Let me
they
give
were
you an
they're all
didn't
example.
go out there.
mobilized.
That's not the case.
Ukraine made a law banning everyone over 16 from leaving the country when Russia invaded. Why?
That's conscription. That's mass
People would leave,
conscription.
even though the war is very popular. Exactly. It's still conscription. The war is popular in Ukraine, but they still had to force people to go fight because not everybody
Did
wants
you
to go.
not see any of the actual protests from actual Russians in their country who actually disregarded the actual war, who didn't even think it was important or something that was even their actual need? Like you keep acting like this stuff didn't happen on TV before I
It did. What I'm saying is this: in the beginning, when the war happened, yes, there was protests, but a lot of those protests got stymied. You have to understand, this war is popular in Russia. Like it's very
It's
popular in
not
Russia. Russian patriot.
popular in Russia.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Because okay, then where's the massive anti-war protests? A lot of them whittled
Do you
away.
know what they do to anti-war protests in Russia? Do you not know what they do to those people?
Well, I do know. But what I'm stating is,
Okay, wait. So if you know what they do to anti-war protests in Russia, why would you even ask me that question if you know what they do to anti-war protests in
but
Russia?
you're making it seem it's like the majority of Russians are against war. I'm telling you that this is the problem with the West. We you have to understand this war is pretty popular in Russia. They want the Ukraine issue to be dealt with. They are very patriotic over there. Like that's what it is. Their hearts are hardened. A lot of Russians
Actually, Zoe,
felt
to your
like the
point.
Ukraine issue,
Oh, sorry.
the Ukraine issue should have been dealt with back in 1991. There was talk about splitting Ukraine between East and West Ukraine. This is a lot of, and the thing is, what didn't help was the Maidan protests in 2014, and unfortunately, what happened with the Maidan protests in 2014 in Ukraine, a lot of these neo Nazis, came to power, and then there was the Donbass rebellion that happened in eastern Ukraine. These people don't see themselves as Ukrainians. They see themselves as Russians. They want to be part of Russians. So the Russian people had a soft spot for them. Now, when the special military operation, whatever they called it, started, a lot of them were like, well, do we really need to go to war with Ukraine? I mean, yeah, many said that instead of sending troops, why don't we do a no-fly zone in the Donbass? Or why don't we just, provide them arms? What changed was that after these many battles that happened, after a lot of that fucked up shit that Ukrainian neo Nazis have done, it hardened the Russian public's heart because now they see like, okay, these guys are neo Nazis. They see as Ukraine as the enemy now, and we have to understand Russians. They don't like Nazis because they fought a war against Nazi Germany and they lost about 27 million people. That still is a big thing in Russia. So for a lot of them, the war got popular because they saw, some of the shit that the Ukrainian military has done, and it hardened their hearts, and they want to see this war be dealt through to the end. I mean, look at what's going on in southern Ukraine. Ukraine is launching a counteroffensive and is going nowhere, and many Russians are happy because they're seeing Leopard tanks being burned. They're seeing a lot of Western equipment being blown up. It it ginned up a lot of patriotism. That's how Russians are. I'm just saying that's what it is. We think their society is like our society. We are very casualty adverse. We don't like wars unless we are attacked. Over there, it's totally different. It's a different mindset. And what I'm saying is that, after the battles of Bakhmut, after the battles of Solidar, after all these battles where Russia won, he made the war even more popular. Like if you see this offensive that's going right now, if that offensive fails, a lot more Russians are going to support it now because now we see that we can defeat the Ukrainians. It's a whole different. It's a whole bunch of different things that's made the war, popular in Russia. But the main thing is the fact of they see Ukraine as a neo-Nazi state. That's what it is. And for Russians, they don't like that at all. I mean, that's why you see Putin mention, Ukraine is a neo-Nazi state. It gins up that memory of World War II. It's like, it brings that up. So
actually, one thing. So even going further back, I don't know if you guys caught the speech Putin made when he first launched the invasion. I found it interesting. He mentioned Russia was betrayed 3 times, one by Lenin, one by Soviet leadership, and once by NATO. It is interesting because a lot of Russians don't even believe that Ukraine has legitimate claim to sovereignty. They believe it is part of Russia.
yeah,
And hence why Putin claimed that Lenin betrayed Ukraine by giving it a nation state status. Very interesting.
yeah. That's the thing. Like this has been an issue that's been boiling over for many years. And to take for example, like what happened during the Maidan protest, there was a counter protest, the Russian Spring, and in Odessa, which is in southern Ukraine, there was a massive pro-Russian movement, and this is documented. This is true facts. The Ukrainian government at the time sent the Azov battalion to Odessa to clamp that down, and they killed some people who were pro-Russian. That pissed off a lot of Russians. That's the thing. Then this is the issue with this war is that over here we only see one side of the thing. We see the Ukrainian side, but we don't look into like because I've been following this since 2014. I looked at both sides.
Okay, so who is we? Well, who is we?
I'm talking about the West, the United States.
Okay.
We tend to be very. I mean, if you look at the United States government, whether both political parties, they're very pro-Ukrainian. They're very pro-Ukrainian, and they
Correct.
overlook, the shit that Ukraine has done. They overlook, there's neo-Nazis within the Ukrainian military. I mean, there was a bill that was passed many years ago not to give funding to the Ukrainian military as long as the Azov battalion was there. But then when the war started, we overturned it. So it's like this history is very complicated. It's not like Russia
It's
one
not
day
that
decided
complicated.
to.
It's not that complicated, dude. At the
Extremely
end of the day,
complicated.
it is complicated if you live there, but if you don't live there, you either spend resources to actually fight these people conflict, then it becomes complicated. Different
In fact,
administrations, different goals, different end goals, everything else. Like, let's say that Trump actually did win last election. This whole thing would look totally different. There would probably been no pushback for actually Putin take over everything there. There'd probably be no weapons going over there to support
I disagree.
any of the things that are going over there. That's not the case. I mean, he wouldn't have kept all those documents about the actual military capabilities and the actual everything else if that was the case. That's the military and industrial complex view on that. Who I work for, right? Like that's what that is. I mean, we're arguing different things. I mean, I think this is a soft coup. Like I said, I think this is a reorg. They're still going to be able to do other things, and it's just like they're not going to be any coup with any other place that it ever has happened before. At the end of the day, no matter what you say, it's not Putin's primary plan of what he wanted to do over there. This is a secondary, tertiary, quaternary, quaternary, sexenary plan that he still has to maintain control of the entire area. It's not the primary plan that he had going in here.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, because going in, like when the war started, I mean, Russia went in with only 200,000 troops, and that's kind of crazy because
Yeah.
they underestimated the Ukrainians. I mean, Ukraine's
Correct.
military at the time was
Vietnam, we
pretty strong.
underestimated those people. Korean War, we underestimated those people. The
So
Iraq
yeah, so
War, things were over with quickly. The Iraq and Afghanistan War vastly underestimated those people's ability to fight back. That's what that's the historical history that I'm operating from when I'm talking about histories of other countries and previous conflicts. Like, some things are easy, some things are hard, some things are way harder than we actually thought it was going to be. That's the actual position
yes,
that I'm actually taking.
Well,
yeah.
there's a question that
I think. Well, the one point I will make is what changes now that Russia has shifted on the war of attrition, which is why Ukraine is seeing these horrific, casualty, rates. Is that the Ukrainians have said themselves that's why they're asking for more and more weapons, but the West is struggling to provide for them. They say
I mean,
Russia
because
has
you're
a
providing
20
weapons
a
that can be
20 to
used
1.
against our own troops, though. Like, listen, if this is a situation that you had under control, you would not be asking for help. Like, this is what I'm saying about if a coup was going according to coup rules, you wouldn't need outside help for a coup. You would need outside plans for a coup. But when it came the ability to actually do a coup, it would be 100% yours. It would be 100% that it's done by the things that you wanted to do. You wouldn't need outside help for a coup.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but
Okay.
I think the one thing I disagree is that Putin's trying to get a way out. I guarantee you, a week from now, the war is going to continue. I mean, matter of fact, today, the
Oh no, I
Ukrainians
think it's going to
launched another
continue for
attack.
like years to come. But I think that it's going to be going to the actual level of actually creating a plan so the war could end. I think this is the starting point for the war could end. This is what I think this actual soft coup is, an actual attempt to actually end the actual conflict in that area.
I mean, it remains to be seen. What I'll say is we'll see this winter. I mean, we'll see what happens after this Ukrainian counteroffensive. Like, if it fails, um, what would NATO say? What would NATO tell Ukraine? Like, will NATO say, okay, you got to negotiate, or will they say, okay, we'll give you F-16s? I mean, we'll
But
see.
they're not even. I mean, but the actual and NATO isn't going in there with full NATO force. Can we actually agree on that?
Yeah, obviously. No, that's World War III without.
Okay, that's why I'm saying it's a soft coup. Because if NATO wanted to fight Russia in actual Ukraine, they would fight Russia in actual new Ukraine. This is why I say it's soft, because if it was hard, they wanted this stuff over with as soon as possible, they wouldn't be fighting like this. They'll be fighting way differently than this. Everybody sees that. I mean, can we agree on
I think
that?
they would like to, but it would lead to total destruction.
Correct. That's why I say it's soft rather than hard. We know what coups are. We've seen coups throughout history.
So who's leading the coup? I'm just trying to understand it in your
We're asking
example.
a circular question?
No, I'm just asking like who, because I thought first you were mentioning the leader of the Wagner group, but now it seems like you're saying NATO is leading a coup against Putin.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about the Wagner group exclusively. So don't.
Okay.
So let's not change what my actual points of view are.
No, I'm just
the Wagner
seeking
group
clarification.
is exactly what I'm talking. No. Like, I'm still talking about the Wagner group. I'm not talking about anything else outside of Wagner group, because the Wagner group is the only people who want to actually change the actual direction. So can we agree on that? That I'm always talking about the Wagner group and nothing else?
Okay, yeah, just because the way you were speaking just now, it sounded like NATO. So, okay, thank you.
No. Like, I'm talking about if actual, all right, Wagner group and NATO are two different people, okay? So if the Wagner group is asking for actual help, who is the Wagner group going to get help from?
Sir, but did they ask for help from outside forces?
Sir. I asked you a specific question. If the Wagner group wanted help and armaments to help with their actual issues inside of the country where they are, where they're going to get the help from? Where are they going to get the help from?
Obviously, adversaries of Russia.
Okay, who's an adversary
or support within the country?
Okay, who's an adversary of Russia other than NATO?
It is NATO.
Who's going to be able to provide help?
Well, actually, there are more European countries that are not in NATO currently, like Sweden, Scandinavian countries.
Okay, Sweden's going to give help that's going to help the Wagner group overcome the Russians. Like, okay, we're talking about NATO here. You know what I'm talking about, right? We're not talking about other groups or countries who's never done anything else outside of that. We're talking about Wagner
actually, sorry,
asking for help.
Just one clarification. Sweden has provided significant military support for all kinds of revolutionary movements, especially in Africa. That's why Nelson Mandela thanked Sweden several times during apartheid.
Okay, we're not talking about Africa. We're talking about Russia and Ukraine, not those conflicts. We're talking about this conflict. I know what they've done during those conflicts, but you can't insert that into this specific conflict.
But
no one
the Scandinavian countries are providing support to Ukraine.
No one has actually depended.
That's why they just put their membership to NATO.
Sir, no.
That's why they're trying to join NATO.
Okay, they put in their membership to NATO as soon as this actual thing popped off. This specific deal popped off. They didn't put in their access to NATO or anything else with NATO before this actual issue. Can you agree? Can we agree on that?
Yes.
Okay, we're shutting off release valves for you to be able to insert all these other things into this conversation. So you and me are on the same page. At the end of the day, Sweden has not inserted anything else into this conflict that's going to be able to change the actual direction of this conflict the way that NATO could. Can we agree on that?
No.
So you think that Sweden has more military might and force that they can actually provide to the Wagner group than NATO could? That's a yes or no question. Not more,
but they can provide significant support to Ukraine.
That's a yes or no question. Do you think that they can provide more or they can't provide more? That's a yes or no question.
Obviously, they cannot provide more, but that's not what you asked.
Okay, I'm going to ask the question again. I'll slow it down. Do you think Sweden, because that's the country you brought up, could provide more support to the Wagner group to overcome the things that are happening within their country than NATO could? That's a yes or no question.
No, but you asked me if any entity outside of NATO
I got
could
your
support
answer.
the Wagner
The answer
group.
is no. You understand what I'm asking, but you keep inserting all these other things. Like, okay, we're talking to politically ignorant people who don't know anything about
you
nothing
made
of
an
what we're talking
incorrect
about.
statement.
I didn't make an incorrect statement. I set up a specific yes or no question, and you answered no. If the answer is no, and the more powerful force is NATO rather than Sweden, we have to go with NATO, not Sweden. I understand, like during the Iraq and Afghanistan war, Mexico sent troops. Like, okay, that's why this is where I'm going to expand it because it's actually germane to the conversation. The illegal war that we launched in Iraq and Afghanistan, right? There are people who provided troops to the actual war in Iraq and Afghanistan that didn't even go anywhere near the amount of troops that England, France, and Canada actually supported toward the war, okay? By numbers and casualties. So what you're actually saying is that just because there's another person who's willing to offer support, their support eclipses the people who can offer the most support to the actual situation. And you know that you're dead to the wrong on that. I'm talking about
No,
America,
I'm saying Sweden can provide significant support.
more than
That's
NATO.
my point. Not more than
More
NATO. I
than
never
NATO.
said more. I said
Okay.
significant.
My point is more than NATO. I don't care about Sweden. Nobody is dependent on Sweden to actually provide support to win a war for them. In this actual war, there is NATO or there is nobody. There is no, we are actually dependent on Sweden to actually provide support or we're screwed. You're going to get support from NATO to actually do this, or you're not going to get support at all from anybody else.
But the Wagner Group never asked NATO for support, so the whole point is mute.
It's not.
This is what I'm getting at.
It is.
And that's why Joe and I are saying there is no coup.
All right, so who else are they going to actually provide support? That's going to get them more support. Okay. Here's my specific question that can actually be able to solve this. Who is the Wagner Group going to ask for more support from to actually achieve their long-term goals? Are they going to ask for this long-term support from Sweden, or are they going to ask for it from NATO? Who's going to be able to provide the most support for them? And it's an either or.
I think he's already answered the question earlier.
Correct.
I don't think he's deviating from that. I think that it's a very circular argument. It's the thing here is that the Wagner Group had been working without a lot of military surplus for a while now, which is
that is correct. That is correct.
Which is what Przongi had been saying for quite some time. This isn't like the first time he said this, but once they got bombed a few days ago, I think that is the turning point. And so
I do understand that too. But at the end of the day, we keep depending on Sweden to actually give them stuff when they're actually asking for it from a specific group of people who can give it to them.
I don't think anybody said Sweden, but I think what Jay is saying is that it's not uncommon that Sweden has inserted themselves into military conflicts in the last 10 to 15 years. They've been known to do that. And so it's not uncommon that they would do that. But I don't think that the Wagner Group is waiting on Sweden or anybody else. I think that they are basically.
That's my point. Nobody is waiting on Sweden. That's the only point that I wanted to make. Sure, that was clear. That nobody's waiting on Sweden to do anything. If they were waiting on people, they're waiting on the actual people who can give the arms, not Sweden. That was my only point.
Well, it's not necessarily just the arms, but it's the contractual agreements that the Russian government wants these guys to sign. And I think that's where
that too.
Right. And I think that's where a lot of the breakdown is happening. And I think Zoe had brought that up earlier. And so it is a lot more complicated than what we can actually discuss on the panel. I think that the Wagner Group will go into exile into Belarus. The question is, what are they going to do with a lot of their foreign operations? Because they're not just in Africa. They're in Venezuela. They're in Nicaragua. But
that's also what I'm operating from information that I can't bring up on the panel. right? But I know a lot of this stuff can be actually sussed out without actually even without even going into all that. Like nobody is waiting on a specific country that nobody has ever depended on exclusively to win a battle like this that they're trying to wage. That's the only thing that I wanted to make sure that is very clear. That's the only thing. The only. There's nothing else outside of that.
Well, resources isn't just about arms and ammunition. It's also about, food. These guys are actually digging trenches, and not necessarily having enough caloric intake to actually, be sufficient on the battlefield themselves. I mean, that's been widely vented by Przogi. So I don't think it's. I don't think it's
more assets and resources to be able to do that. It ain't Sweden. That's what I'm saying. It's not those people.
I don't think that anybody was saying that Sweden is the guaranteed alternative. I think what Jay is saying is that it's not uncommon for Sweden to insert themselves. But in regards to the contractual agreements that they have with Russia or with Moscow, is that they're not being fulfilled. And so there's something going on there that needs further a deeper dive into understanding as to why they're doing this. Because you're going to have a mutiny at some point. At some point, people are going to start to push back and say, I'm not going to go into the buzzsaw unless you give me something to defend myself with.
No, this is the beginning of the mutiny. Like what I'm saying is right here is the beginning of the mutiny.
But the mutiny's over. The mutiny's over. Yeah, they've already made the agreement that they're going to leave. That was done a few hours ago. They've already left Rostov, and they're already on their way into Belarus, and so they're going to be stationed there. That part of the coup is already over and done with.
Yes, I keep saying this soft. If it was hard, it would have been way different results. There are already plans on the books of what this thing would actually look like if there was an actual coup. This isn't that.
Well, Putin has been firing, generals for the last, year and a half. I mean, I don't think that's uncommon.
2 years. Oh yeah. I mean, but George W. Bush did the same thing when this war wasn't going good. If he didn't hear good news, general got fired. But it didn't change anything on the ground about at some point you was going to have to leave this conflict empty-handed with whatever you thought was going to be able to happen. What I'm saying is this is going into that same direction to where we're actually changing presidencies from like Bush to actual Obama. And we're actually turning this thing around to where we're trying to find a way for this thing to be over at some point, rather than it's going to go on forever until Russia gets what it wants at this point. That's my overall point. It's just that this is not going to go their way. They're trying to find a soft way out for this guy to get out of it, worm his way out of this by the means of an actual, I'm going to keep saying it, soft coup. At the end of the day, if this was a hard thing that was actually happening within the country, it would have happened a year ago. Now it's probably the worst time to actually do this.
Well, they took the territory, so it's not a matter of what was going to happen a long time. I mean, they've already achieved their objectives. The objective was to take. They're not going to be able to
hold on to it. They're not going to be able to hold on to it. That's all.
Well, you can't hold on to it if you don't have the resources. I'm saying
that's what I'm saying. They don't have the resources. Like
I'm saying that Moscow has a contractual agreement with Wagner that they're not fulfilling, and there's something going on there that they don't want. Either somebody in the defense ministry is not
that's my
capable of
point.
doing it,
Mike,
or they don't
my
want.
Overall point. It hasn't happened yet, and they don't have the ability to fulfill it.
No, I think they do. I mean, I don't see what the problem is. I mean, everybody else has military arms. I don't see why they wouldn't have it. I think I think asking them to stand in a territory where in the wide open and not have any sort of resources, I think that's insane. I would think that there's going to be an uprising at some point with the folks on the ground, and especially with this
that's why with this character. It a soft coup. That's why I keep calling it a soft coup.
I mean, you can call it what you want. I mean, you can call it what you want. But the thing here is, he has a legitimate gripe with the Kremlin. He has a legitimate gripe with the Kremlin.
He does. But at the end of the day, are they going to come to the rescue of him? The answer is they can't.
And if they don't, then then Moscow can't complete its mission. It can't take any more territory until they actually satisfy.
That's what I'm saying. It is soft for him to actually exit the theater without getting what he wants. That's all I'm saying.
All right, let me answer these questions in the chat. Blue Sox says Sweden is known for neutrality up until now. What conflicts did they get involved in? Oh man,
yeah.
I mean, we can't go over that. The next question.
No. Sweden has been involved in most of your left-wing revolutions throughout the 20th century and the 21st century. The support for Palestinians, the support for the Kurds. Support
Zambia,
for
Angola, Mozambique.
Yeah. A lot of your uprisings in South Africa, a lot of your movements in there.
Yeah, all African countries, mostly African countries.
Well, they've also have been very supportive of Arab, Middle Eastern as well. So I don't think it's out of the realm. Sweden is very tactical in what they do. They're very left wing. Or they have a very strong left-wing movement inside their country in terms of the socialist movement, what they call themselves social democrats. And so it's not unfathomable that they would have this, and that's why Turkey is at odds with Sweden, because that Turkey knows that the Kurdish, the PKK has been vastly supported by the Swedes, and they've been kicking Turkey's ass on the battlefield, and they know that. And so when you have Sweden as a resources, we shouldn't discount them and say that they can't actually provide any sort of credibility in terms of what can happen on the battlefield. Anything can happen when it comes to foreign interference. It doesn't really take that much.
And can I add that Sweden has some of the most advanced military hardware in the world: fighter jets and submarines.
Yep, they do.
They sure do.
Yeah. Zoe, I wanted to get your take on this piece from Al Jazeera, and we should have covered this some time ago. And there's another piece I probably should have covered too. South African Army chief visits Moscow in wake of U.S. weapons claim. South African military roaming around Russia. What's your take on that, Zoe Rosie?
Well, my take from this is that South Africa sort of is kind of moving itself into the Russia camp, but then they play both sides. Sometimes they placate BRICS, but then other times they placate the West. So I think this is more of just South Africa, visiting both sides. I don't see how South Africa would provide, because I heard this report that the U.S. claims that South Africa is providing arms to Russia. I don't see that. I think it's more so maybe South Africa is looking to buy arms from Russia, but again, I just see it as more of just South Africa trying to push itself to more of the BRICS camp, trying to show that it's really down with the BRICS cause. But we've seen how South Africa does. They placate Russia, China, but then they placate the United States. It's sort of like Turkey. They play both sides. One day Turkey is like supporting Russia, and then the next they're supporting the NATO line. So I think it's just been playing both sides. To be honest, and the U.S. Accusing South Africa of providing weapons. They accused China of that months ago. There was really,
they accused Egypt of it too.
There's no real evidence of it. I think it's just more the U.S. warning them, say, hey, listen, if you become if you send weapons, or if you try to become a member of this war, we're gonna hit you in the back of the head with the sanctions. I think it's just more of a warning. I think it's just Washington saying, hey, don't even think about it. because from what I've seen, there's because I follow the war, closely. I don't see, you know, Russia, getting, weapons from like or needing weapons from like China or Russia or from from South Africa. What they have taken, the one country that's helped Russia is been Iran. Iran has helped them with those drones, and those drones have been like a devastating game changer on Ukraine's air defense systems. Those Shahid drones. I've I know Iran has some good drones, but I didn't think they were this good. Like I don't know they were this good. But that's like the only country that so far that I've seen that has provided weapons to Russia. Because even the Russians said this, like when they entered this war, they didn't think drone warfare was a big deal. So now I think they bought like I think about 200,000 drones from Iran, and
Mhm.
then they with those drones because they're so cheap to make because it's all about costs. A Patriot missile costs millions and millions of dollars, and these Iranian drones only cost about a few $10,000. So Russia can buy all these, and whatever Patriot missiles Ukraine gets, the cost will be too much for the West because the West they can't send all their Patriot missiles to Ukraine because it costs money, but Russia can buy these drones and build them on the cheap. Um, so yeah, that's the only country I've seen that's aided Russia in this war. I don't know what South Africa can give, to be honest.
But why, here's my other, position on this is that why would they use a why would they use a cargo ship? I mean, you have cargo planes. I mean, who wants to wait? If I'm Russia, I probably don't want to wait, several days for, ammunition to get to Moscow and risk, the United States. Because if that was the case, why didn't the United States intercept the ship? They intercept every other ship that, that's in the Indo-Pacific. Doesn't make a
Exactly.
whole lot of sense to me. But to your point, Zoe, a lot of your ANC members or some of your ANC members do speak Russian because they were
Oh, yeah,
educated.
that's true.
Yeah, they were educated in Moscow, and so from what I know, Cyril Ramaphosa speaks Russian as well, or at least some, just enough to hold a conversation with Putin. I don't know. I've always predicted that this war would actually drag the Africans into the conflict at some point, even just regardless of their neutrality position or position of neutrality. I think that they were going to get dragged in at some point, and so what I see happening going forward is that South Africa will have to figure out what they're going to do for rearmament because they're in no position right now to fight a conflict beyond their borders. I think that at some point they're going to have to figure out what kind of arms they're going to have to procure for the future because they can't rely on Russia because if they actually go out and buy Russian arms, CAATSA, CAATSA, which is Countering American Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, prevent anybody from buying arms from Moscow. And so South Africa is going to have to figure this out. I think that, India is a great partner or would be a great partner in terms of arms development. They are part of the BRICS and, they have a complete history of being subordinate to, to the British, and they don't want to actually rely on any sort of British hardware or anything that has any British components in it. This would probably be perfect for them.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing with India, because India they buy a lot of weapons, from Russia. So like India could be could be sort of like a middleman, um, you know, giving some like Russian type weapons, like or that sort of thing to South Africa. I mean, China, I think South Africa they can't go to China too much because tensions between the U.S. and China is like real bad because that will put the target on them. So I think India, like you said, is the perfect country because the U.S. is trying to get India on their side. If South Africa goes too goes like pro BRICS and like we're only gonna buy weapons from China and Russia, yeah, the West is gonna slap sanctions with them. And South Africa's economy can't afford, sanctions at this point.
Yeah. Jay, were you going to say something?
No, actually, you got to it. I just wanted to highlight the long relationship between the ANC, African National Congress, ruling party of South Africa, and Russia. It goes way back the early 20th century. So, yeah, there's long-standing ties there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to quickly add. What's up, panel?
What's going on, bro?
Yeah. No, I was going to quickly add. The only thing with Russian military equipment is I don't know how eager people are going to be to buy it because it's kind of got exposed on the battlefield in the sense of I was actually watching a Vice documentary where you've got Ukrainian soldiers that are basically collecting Russian equipment that they're finding on the field that's not working and trying to repurpose it. So like they're taking drones and, taking like grenades or something that didn't work and basically trying to figure out whatever's missing or whatever the malfunction is. And then basically creating, drones and grenades mounted to drones because basically they can't get munitions to from the States fast enough. So
it's salvaging.
Yeah. Repurposing, a lot of salvaging, a lot of creativity in the sense of like, you sort of think of like big, large weapon systems, but like I said, they've really been forced to be innovative in how they're going about fighting in some of these battles. So while people, I don't think it'll completely like get rid of the Russian industry, they definitely took a hit with how some of their weaponry has been performing on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Go
ahead, Jay.
Oh no, I was thinking maybe like on the other hand, it's a great advertisement for Russian hardware. Maybe they may see it and say, "Hey, we got to pick up some of those."
Let me read this piece from RT. Defense chief warns Wagner fighters against taking part in armed coup. The Russian military has urged Wagner Group private military company soldiers to cease their armed insurrection, urging them to return to their bases. In a statement on Saturday, the ministry claimed that members of the PMC have been tricked into taking part in Wagner Group chief Evgeny Prigozhin's criminal gamble, adding that some Wagner fighters have already understood their mistake and have asked their authorities for help in safely returning to their permanent deployment areas. The assistance has already been provided to those soldiers and commanders who started. The ministry stated, asking Wagner members to show prudence and get in touch with representatives of the Russian Defense Ministry of law enforcement agencies as soon as possible. We guarantee everyone's safety, the statement said. The ministry's appeal comes after Prigozhin accused the Russian Defense Ministry on Friday of carrying out a missile strike on a PMC camp, which he said resulted in multiple casualties while promising a response. The Defense Ministry denied the allegation, and the Russian authorities say the FSB has opened a criminal investigation to Prigozhin for allegedly advocating a mutiny. On Saturday morning, media outlets reported increased military activity in the southern Russian city of Rostov-on-Don, with video showing tanks and groups of soldiers moving on the streets. I think there's a lot going on at the top. Putin has fired several of his generals already and decision makers. I think he thinks that these guys may be insubordinate themselves. Or he maybe thinks that they're incompetent because a lot of them have been given, poor intelligence, so to speak. Saying, they can take the battlefield in this many weeks, or what their capabilities are, what the adversary's capabilities are, and then they walk into a buzzsaw, at night. And so I don't know. Russia is not a slouch when it comes to military capabilities. They have enough battleships, cruise, corvettes, destroyers, hypersonic missiles. I don't get it. Personally, I don't get it. I don't get what they're doing. If this was any other military, I think that this would have ceased maybe some months ago. They would have figured this out.
Well, the thing is, we have to understand too, like the Ukrainian military was no slouch too. Before the war, Ukraine had about 200,000 men active duty, 200,000 in reserve, and they had about, I think, 500,000 men that they can mobilize, who had combat experience, who were former military that they mobilized. So I think we have to
But keep
understand
in mind though that they were trained for the last 10 years by U.S. forces.
Exactly.
Whereas the Russians didn't really have that sort of engagement. They didn't have that a total engagement of the soldiers that they're pointing out now. Those guys were not fully trained in the capacity that the Ukrainians were trained, and a lot of the Ukrainian military was rebuilt into multiple battalions, and so I mean their military is basically a Western military inside Eastern Europe, whereas the Russians are still operating from a perspective of the 90s, and that's not really acceptable going into this.
Well, the other thing is too,
so one last point I'll make is that's the reason why the Russians have changed tactics. They went from a quick blitzkrieg to like a war of attrition, and that's where the Ukrainians are suffering these heavy losses. That's why Ukraine is asking for more and more weapons, because the Russians have a 10-to-1 artillery advantage. That's devastating. I mean, I saw the Battle of Bakhmut. Ukraine was losing entire companies of men like per hour. I think that those one Ukrainian soldiers said, like, when a new company comes to the battlefield, about 70% of them get wiped out in 3 minutes because of the artillery. So that's why the Russians changed tactics to focus on artillery. They basically devastated Ukraine's air defense. That's why Ukraine is begging for more Patriot missiles, because Russia basically took out their air defense, and Russia's air superiority, as we see in this current counteroffensive that's going on in Zaporozhye. The Ukrainians are saying, like, we have no answers to the Russian helicopters and fighter jets, because now for the first time they're fighting freely. It's just the Russian way of war. That's how they've always been, brute force, and they're just gonna use attrition. They're just gonna try to grind the Ukrainians, to nothing. It's pretty fucked up. It's pretty fucked up, but yeah, that's what it is.
But the thing with Russia though is you have a morale issue. You have a lot of people in Russia who did not want to be involved in this war, versus if you're the Ukrainians, yeah, you have a morale issue as well, but you have people who basically are taking up defense against their homeland, versus you had Russians literally breaking their leg trying to not be drafted in the army. So you have that. That's one thing to think about as far as like why there was a Russia was at least struggling initially in the battle and things weren't going as planned. The other thing is readiness of military. To your point, Mike, Russia does have a lot of this military equipment, but there are questions around basically like the actual readiness, that did Putin really know like how ready his military was, or was someone basically just basically being a yes man because they didn't really want to tell him like, hey, things, we may have this technological capability that's an advantage, but it's not been up to par and it's not been maintained like it should have. And some people were speculating there could have been some corruption. To the point with the armed coup, the one thing I'll say is like the people who were actually in the security forces, who are basically mercenaries, they're kind of in a rock and a hard place, because basically if you have Putin basically saying, hey, he's going to punish these people. Basically, I'm sure he's going to kill this guy, and whoever he sees is, basically starting up as a soft coup, or the insurrection. But then the guy who's leading this, who's the leader of this private security firm, he's known for being pretty brutal as well. like sending guys into battle with no training whatsoever, kind of taking that same mentality. So you're kind of taking a risk either way at this point of, do you want to like go back to your post and then like run the risk of like the people you're working for actually being somewhat successful, and then you got to answer for why you didn't back them? Or do you go and try to, you know, fight against the Kremlin, and, you know, you're not successful, and you got to deal with Putin? So it's not a spot I want to be in right now.
Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah. Oh,
I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Zoe.
yeah. Again, just like I said, in regards to this coup, from what I've read, you know, is from various sources, was that, you know, the Russian military was doing a reshuffling, and what they wanted to do was to bring Wagner under their control. There was like a new contract, that, you know, Putin asked Prigozhin, you know, hey, would you sign this? And Prigozhin said no, simply because that would take away Wagner's independence. And also, you know, he's the CEO of Wagner. He didn't want to, he sees Wagner as his baby, and he did not like Shoigu, who's the defense minister. He did not like Gerasimov, who's in charge of the military operation in Ukraine. Um, so he felt like, why would I sign away my, you know, army of, you know, 25,000 men to you incompetent idiots? For whatever reason, it blew up to how it is right now. But yeah, Prigozhin is pretty brutal. I mean, we saw in Bakhmut what they did, but you know, he never really, just like what Jay pointed out, he never really criticized Putin. He only criticized the military establishment. So I I mean, I think eventually he's probably going to get killed. And I think Wagner is probably going to get dissolved, or it will be just absorbed by the Russian Ministry of Defense. Um, and also, I want to mention a point about the you know, the readiness. Yes, Russian readiness was poor. Like, it was poor from initially. But what we're seeing now is that, again, you look at the counteroffensive that's going on in Zaporozhia. You know, the Ukrainians, they had a lot of in the beginning of the war, they had a lot of experienced NCOs, a lot of, you know, experienced fighters. But what's happening as this war dragged on, a lot of them are killed or wounded. So that's why Ukraine has gone through this 10th wave of mobilization. And the way it works is in Ukraine. So in Ukraine, you can still volunteer for the military, but if you don't volunteer, you get conscripted to the territorial defense forces. Now, if you get conscripted to the territorial defense forces, you only get 3 weeks of training, and then they sent you to the trenches in Donbass. That's it, 3 weeks. This has been confirmed. Now, if you volunteer, you join these battalions that were trained in Europe. These are the guys, like the 82nd Brigade that's in Ukraine, or the third mechanized, the fourth mechanized brigades. These guys were the ones that were trained with the Leopard tanks. These are the more experienced. These are the guys. These are the volunteers who believe in defending Ukraine, and then they mixed them with some of the more experienced fighters, which was pretty smart. But the thing is, and this is the issue with Ukraine. This is the conundrum that they're in. They keep going on the attack. They should be on static defense. Because when you attack and you're attacking an enemy that has air superiority in artillery, you're gonna lose a lot of men. Like, you guys probably saw the videos of those Leopard tanks, those Bradleys that got blown up. Like, it was bad. It was really, really bad. But Ukraine, they have the potential to win this war if they go on the defensive. If they continue trying to go on the offensive, they're going to lose a lot of manpower. I mean, yes, we could look back at the Kharkov offensive, the Kherson offensive, where they got in territory, but they lost entire battalions a day taking those territories at what cost? So the readiness of the Ukrainian military is worsening because they're losing, experienced fighters, and they have to replace them with conscripts, which brings, the problem. That's where the Russians, they gone with the strategy. We have a bigger population. We have we have a military industry. The Ukrainians they ran out of all their Soviet equipment. Now they have to wait on the West, get trained on this equipment. They're just biding their time. They think this war of attrition is going to lead to a point that the Ukrainians will something's going to crack within Ukrainian society, and it remains to be seen. All I'm saying is but from what I've seen from the Zaporozhian offensive is horrifying. Like the Ukrainians have no air defense, no air support, not even artillery, and they're charging into these minefields and getting obliterated. I don't know who's advising them to do this because it just doesn't make sense. They're making the same mistakes as funny what the Russians were doing in the beginning of the war. So
Yeah.
But doesn't it also, how this goes is depends on also how Russia handles this coup. Like if they have to divert troops from the front lines, that gives, because I already saw people were saying that Ukraine could go on the offensive if this actually becomes, something where Putin's really got something on his hands he's got to go deal with and divert attention away from the war.
that is true, but again, like when this was all happening yesterday, the Ukrainians yet again, they launched another attack on the Russian security belt within Zaporozhye. Just like I said, Russia has like 5 lines of defense, and the Ukrainians have not even reached the first line. And they launched another attack from the town of Orezhi to try to get to I forgot the name of the town they're trying to get to. And again, they launched the attack, faced heavy resistance, and they pulled back. And now, from what it seems it's been resolved. I don't know, but
Yeah, no, this will blow over in a few weeks. I think that keep in mind that our Prigozhin is Putin's right-hand man. He's very close to him. So I don't see them killing him and getting away with it. It'd be like it would be like Trump getting rid of what's his name? Steve Bannon. It'd be like Trump getting rid of him and making him disappear. Not going to happen.
And the one point I make is that when this was all happening, you had Wagner soldiers who were on social media saying like, we don't know what the hell is going on. We don't know what Prigozhin's doing. Like they denounced it. Like it seemed like the guys who were on the field, they didn't know what the hell was going on. Like they were confused. It seemed like Prigozhin probably got about 1,000 men that he could trust to create this whole situation, and it got resolved. Now they're going to Belarus. I don't know what that means. I mean, will they? I ultimately think in the coming days we're going to see what's going to happen. Either Wagner is going to get dissolved and is going to be absorbed by the MOD, or
Well, I think that Belarus will pay for a contractual agreement to keep Wagner at the border between Ukraine and Belarus itself. Because if Belarus doesn't want to, Belarusians don't really want to fight either, and so they don't really want to put their guys on the front line, and so it's perfect place for Wagner to be without actually getting killed, but still make some money. Maybe not as much, but just enough to sustain themselves for the time being until the conflict is over. And you could potentially see them, get exported into the Russian enclave, which is Transnistria, as well. It's not too far fetched of out of the realm. So I don't see them getting rid of him. I don't see them getting rid of Wagner either. I think Wagner is just too deep in too many of global areas of interest to just get rid of them and create a power vacuum, or even take them over, because then it makes Russia a party to any sort of ongoing conflict rather than a private agency. U.S. would never probably take over Blackwater or Academy, for that matter, or Tiger Swan, or some of these other PMCs, to avoid any sort of any sort of social conflict on the ground. I think that they'll just leave them where they are right now and just complete the operation as is. It's not. I've heard rumors of them going into Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan and pulling some of these hardened fighters from there and bringing them into Ukraine. That's going to be pretty interesting because that's a whole entire different theater. It's not the desert. You got cold winters and you got muddy spring operations. It's a really different sort of position for the Russia to put themselves into.
Exactly, and this type of war, and that's the other thing too. The NATO chief, he said it himself. Like, the war in Ukraine is in a scale and scope that they've not seen ever. So this is different. This is not like a series of a war. This is industrial war, and I've seen videos and imaging of the fighting, and this is like World War II and World War I combined. Like in some theaters, it's like World War I, where you have trench lines, and you have to fire tons of artillery in this one trench line, but it's so fortified. And okay, you think the coast is clear, and then you get mowed down by machine gun, and then you add the city fighting, like the battles of Mariupol, Bakhmut, Lysychansk, all those other places. Like it was intense urban warfare. Like this is real. We haven't seen a war like this since probably Korea. Like this is different. You have this is a real deal conventional war with two near peer powers going at it. And that's why the casualty rates on both sides is crazy, because it's like we haven't seen anything like this in a long time. Like the Russians are firing 500,000 artillery shells a day. I can't even imagine. Like that's crazy. The Ukrainians are firing, even though it's smaller, but I think throughout the whole war in Iraq, I think the U.S. only fired, I think, 10 to 15,000 artillery shells, like in total, because we
it's
use air support.
Well, it goes back to like you're saying, like, hey, the whole war of attrition. That's one of the things. Like, that's the whole thing. Like, if you look at something like the Powell Doctrine, like they're against these types of wars, long drawn out. But you have NATO that's offering support, but it's not full fledged coming to end this. Otherwise, you'd have. Don't get me wrong. I think it's smart because obviously they're not a member of NATO, and you don't want to start World War III and a whole nuclear warfare. But this is sort of the same thing, sort of same scenario of World War I and II, is that you have this long drawn out conflict versus like just using superior technology and ending it as quick as possible.
Exactly. I mean, and what you've seen is there's some limitations, with some of the tech, because I take, for example, all the aid the Ukrainians have gotten, the Bakhtar drones. Remember you seen those images where they had those Turkish drones, and then, the Russians, adjusted. They realized, okay, drones are the real deal. Let's use our electric warfare capabilities. And the Russians have pretty good electric warfare capabilities. A lot of Ukrainians with this current offensive have said they send drones, and none of the drones are working.
Well, the thing here is those drones have 3-cylinder Canadian engines in them, and so the Canadians stopped sending those engines and parts to support those drones to Turkey, and so that's why you don't see them anymore. The same engines that go inside the Can-Am Spider are the same engines that they use in those drones, and so the Canadians stopped sending any sort of support, logistical support for that, and decoupled themselves from that supply chain. So that pretty much grounded all of those drones.
Yeah, and one last quick point that I'll make is like what this whole war has shown is like, I mean, for decades, the U.S. military will always say like, technology, the future of warfare, technology will help win wars, and what this has shown is, if you have two near peer powers going at it, it could start as technology as first, but it will go back to, brutal artillery, tanks, air superiority. It just goes back to that. Like you know, you can have the best tech, but for a long drawn out war, you know, you need to you know, you're gonna need to go back to the old school ways of wars. You know, artillery is called the god of warfare for a reason. You're gonna have to use artillery. Yeah. You're gonna have to use tanks. You know, the people are saying that, oh, maybe tanks are outdated. No, like you're still gonna need manpower. Yes, you know, we have all
Mhm.
this technology coming with robots and all, but I think at the end of the day, you're still going to need, you know, manpower and just artillery to kind of, you know, basically break your enemy's will to fight.
I don't know if you'll necessarily need as much manpower, because the other thing is you've got to look at autonomy, because as AI becomes more and more integrated, you're going to see things. I mean, they've already, I believe Israel, they had like an autonomous sub that they've already developed, or unmanned sub. So that's where at least people are pushing this. You're pushing for unmanned vehicles, unmanned ground vehicles, unmanned tanks. So I think this, like, well, I see what you're saying. You will still need those. I don't know if you'll necessarily need the manpower in that regard.
That's what the Russians have been doing with the T-55s that they brought back out. They've actually have added some automated controls to them so that they don't need actual man in them. They can actually roll them into Ukrainian offensives. Which is actually pretty interesting.
Yeah,
they fill them up with explosives.
Well, they can actually use them to fire shells. They don't need an actual man inside the tank to fire the shells. And so they figured out a way how to repurpose them.
And a country that's going to be a key one to watch on this front as well is Japan, because they've got an aging population. So they've got a real incentive to go and really figure out autonomous warfare and how much they can really integrate into, what they can actually turn into autonomous, be it ships, planes, tanks, all those things.
Go ahead, Jay.
One thing I would just say, I think two things preventing use of more modern technology. One is cost. It's just so expensive. Have you looked at the cost of each of these like anti-aircraft missiles they sent to Ukraine? Two, I think we're kind of stuck in World War II level technology and tactics, like you said, so because newer technology is quite dangerous. It's like Pandora's box, for example, like biological weapons. I mean, once you let those loose, it might mean the end of humanity. I mean, for example, there's weapons that can drop a tungsten rod from space, but these things, you start using stuff like this, is game over for everyone. One thing I found interesting, I don't know if you guys remember, do you remember at the beginning of the war, they were asking the Latin American countries to give Ukraine weapons because they're the only places that still had old Russian hardware.
Yeah.
And I found that interesting. So it seems that even Ukrainians, they did the evaluation and they found that maybe upgrading is not worth it. Maybe like Cold War, World War II level technology is good enough to fight modern war.
Yeah, if you just want to fire indiscriminately, that makes a lot of sense. But I don't care where a weapon was made or manufactured. I was saying that on DC's the Code Breakers earlier today. When Paradox is talking about whether or not, Russia's nuclear weapons even work. Trust me, those weapons work. I don't care when they were made. Those things work. Those things have a controller to them, a fire control mechanism to them. They work. And I don't care when they were made. That shit hurts. I don't care who makes it, when it was made, or where it's deployed from. Those bullets hurts, and then those nuclear weapons will hurt too.
Well, they've got the largest stockpile in the world. So even if, half of them don't work, it doesn't take, you don't need a ton of them to blow up the world several times over. So you don't need even necessarily for the whole fleet to work. To your point too, on the new tech, the other things that people have to be concerned about, sort of to your same point, Jay, is if you deploy new tech, the other side getting a hold of it. Like that's another concern as well, is that, hey, if we send something, too advanced, you run the risk of, it being shot down and, Russians being able to reverse engineer, your some of your things that may be a technological advantage. And then that's sort of out there in the warfare as well. So I think that's another element that people will always sort of be cautious of is it falling in the wrong hands in the midst of battle.
That's a great point, because I remember Israel got upgraded because I think they like crashed an F-35 over Lebanon or something. Somebody got a hold of it. That's a good point.
Yeah, you saw the same thing on the I didn't realize this. I was talking to somebody. They were saying on the raid for Osama bin Laden to go and kill him, they actually had to blow up one of the helicopters. The U.S. did, because they were afraid it was going to get shot down, and they didn't want, it was a specially equipped special ops type of helicopter, so they had to detonate it, literally blow it up. So people would not, Al Qaeda would not be able to basically reverse engineer it or take in stuff from it and basically sell military technology.
Well, that didn't work out too on Afghanistan now, did it? They seem to reverse engineer all that stuff that was left behind. Let me play this clip. This is from TFI Global News.
Acknowledge the importance of partnership and cooperation. They are now attempting to extend this link of unity beyond economic integration and into other sectors such as military. This could be a watershed movement in the Caribbean integration process. Hello and welcome to TFI Global Caribbean, TFI Global's channel specially dedicated to the land of sun and sand. I'm your host Akanksha. Let us begin. According to recent reports, the defense and security forces across the Caribbean will now be the centers of excellence for various aspects of tactical response and training. Barbados will now act as the center of excellence for the Faculty of Medicine to train soldiers and officers and work with regional and international security partners to improve and enhance response from all participants in the short, medium, and long term. Moreover, Barbados will maintain responsibility for medical response. We will also maintain responsibility for non-commissioned officer developmental training and also for drill and ceremonial, disclosed the Chief of Staff of the Barbados Defence Force, Commodore Errington Sherland. Trinidad and Tobago will continue to be in the charge of creating maritime-type training. Guyana and Belize will be in charge of jungle training and special operations, recognizing the need for some flexibility. Nations such as Jamaica, which already has the Caribbean Military Academy, would be a crucial catalyst in making this dream of military unification a reality. Speaking to the media at the field medical camp located at the garrison Savannah across from St. Anne's Fort as the conference culminated, United Armed Forces Admiral Sir Tony Ratican agreed that the centers are one of the key takeaways, as each territory will have its own niche responsibility to make the region stronger and more secure. So we have had a conversation around the Bahamas is a center for excellence for drones, and so that we all learn from Bahamas, with Bahamas leading the way. We have had a conversation about Trinidad and Tobago. Does Trinidad and Tobago lead in terms of the training of maritime junior officers? And do we, the UK, support that? That to me is very, very special. The communion of interest, trust, and confidence in this group is so strong, and it enables that to happen, the Admiral said. You see, a Caribbean Collective Security Agreement represents a pivotal event in the island's history. Security in the Caribbean region has been observed as being intrinsically related to the United States owing to its geographic location, and is thus heavily affected and sponsored by the United States. As a result, any regional security structure for the Caribbean aids in its escape from America's grip. As the international community grapples with the ramifications of massive shifts in the security environment, it is experiencing an identity crisis. This environment is defined by complexities and changes as new security issues and challenges emerge. The challenge in this complicated and challenging international security context is that the military in the Caribbean cannot continue to operate as usual. The military cannot exist in the absence of a Caribbean identity, a Caribbean mandate, a Caribbean philosophy, and a Caribbean doctrine. As a result, the recent incident provides a light of hope for the Caribbean states in achieving a common security aim. A Caribbean NATO may be in the works.
So, Jay, you're a fellow top shotter. So what do you think?
No, this is excellent. For Caribbean survival, especially English speaking, I mean, we need more integration. These countries were not designed to be viable. And in order to survive, I mean, we have to have this kind of integration. I mean, especially militarily, because right now, as we speak, there are two ongoing border disputes, one with Guyana and Venezuela, and one with Guatemala and Belize. Guatemala and Venezuela have significantly larger populations than both Belize and Guyana, and stronger militaries. Right now, it's only the Monroe Doctrine, protection of U.S., that's saving these two countries. So it's very important. And not to mention that Caribbean has issues with food security. Not one of these islands is food independent. Almost all the food is imported. And we have these two countries with huge land masses, Belize and Guyana, that could produce enough food to feed the entire Caribbean. There's bauxite in Jamaica. There's oil in Trinidad. There are banking hubs in Barbados, the Bahamas, St. Lucia. We have oil, minerals. I mean, I think if we could work together, I mean, of course, the first attempt at the West Indian Federation failed, but I think we're a little bit more advanced at this point politically. I think it could work.
So,
especially with what we learned from the first attempt.
I think this is a very interesting, idea. I think one big reason why there is this push for like a Caribbean NATO, everything that was said before is true. There's food insecurity, and there's also these border disputes, but also there's also internal issues with, crime. Arms trafficking is a big problem in the Caribbean. It's a very big problem, and it's a transnational issue. But what was the Caribbean strategy before? Each Caribbean country dealt with arms trafficking, drug trafficking within their own borders, but it doesn't work that way. There has to be more collaboration in that regard. I mean, and I think this is coming to the heels of the elephant in the room, that's Haiti, the crisis that's ongoing in Haiti. And Haiti has a big population, it's a big nation, and it borders DR. Jamaica is not too far away. And what we've seen increasingly is that guns go to Haiti and then they end up going to DR and then end up going to Jamaica. So there's some of these people in the Caribbean who have like an anti-Haitian, talking point that's saying, oh, the Haitians are sending guns over there. But it's a lot more, complicated than that. I think that's why you've seen so many Caribbean nations are pushing for some type of force to be in the ground in Haiti, because to put it mildly, the security situation in Haiti has deteriorated significantly the last 2 to 3 years. It's gotten bad. It's become lawless. So I think this is trying to have a transnational, a regional plan to how to deal with arms trafficking, drug trafficking, because it is starting to become a major problem. In regards to Haiti, the U.S. and Canada are reluctant to do anything about it. So I think a lot of Caribbean countries, this idea was out here, but now they're trying to figure out, okay, maybe we can make this into reality. Could we see a Caribbean task force on the ground in Haiti? I don't know, but
I think that's what they're pointing to.
Yeah, I think that's.
But they don't have the lift capability to move soldiers and resources to Haiti at all. Barbados does not have any warships. Trinidad has just a Coast Guard. Guyana's in no position to really get involved in anything too far away. Jamaica is risk
We cannot fix our
averse.
own problems.
Yeah,
I mean,
Very
actually,
risky.
the Prime Minister of Jamaica gave a speech a couple of months ago
yeah,
about the possibility of sending boots on the ground, but it was not received well, and rightfully so. I mean, we have enough issues, and I don't think Haitians want Jamaican soldiers patrolling, unless it's humanitarian solely, and we're handing out water and food. But
yeah,
I don't know about that.
yeah.
I mean, the situation has gotten so bad that a lot of Haitians on the ground would welcome any type of force because the police has basically
Interesting.
collapsed, isn't it? Has collapsed as an entity. I think the only country that could send troops, but it won't happen because of the history is DR. I think.
Or Cuba.
Well, you think the U.S. will? U.S.
No, I
is
said
not.
Cuba.
I mean, Cuba can, but you think the U.S. will allow Cuban troops in Haiti? That would create a crisis. And keep in mind, the Haitian elites are very, pro-U.S. They would be against such an idea like that.
Cuba had to pull out their doctors from Haiti because of fear of actually having them apprehended, and so there's a lot of fear of everybody going into Haiti at this point. With
But the one last point I'll make is that
Mhm.
the thing is a lot of the surrounding Caribbean countries are just worried because if Haiti were to collapse, it would be an earthquake across the region. So that's what they don't want. Haiti is. They say there's 12 million Haitians. I think it's higher than that because Haitians keep having babies. I think it's more like 15, 18 million. I mean, we're talking about if Haiti were to, God forbid, were to collapse, we're talking about weapons and refugees swarming to go to like DR or swarming to go to, Jamaica. That's what everyone's fearing, but nobody knows, what to do. And like you said, Mike, they don't have the lift. They don't have the logistics to, okay, we're gonna have all these troops congregate to Bahamas, and then we're gonna then go from Bahamas then to Haiti. They don't have that. I think only DR can because they can just go through land. But
Yeah.
even then, that's very dicey.
Well, the Dominican Republic doesn't want anything to do with it. I mean, they're already building a wall illegally against Haiti, and so I imagine that's going to come down at some point. But a Caribbean NATO, that's. I mean, I don't know why they call it a Caribbean NATO. I think they should just call it a federation of forces. The term NATO just doesn't sit well with me, but I still think that there's something to be done there. I noticed the one piece that they're missing is cyber warfare. That they have not really taken that into consideration. I mean, it's still early. This only happened a couple months ago. I meant to do a whole entire live stream on it, but I kind of slipped through the cracks. But yeah, I think something's going to happen. I know that Barbados has been training. Their military has been training in China. That we do know. We do know that the Chinese military have been in Venezuela and in Cuba. Chinese military bases all throughout Latin America is not unrealistic at this point. I mean, it's pretty much a reality. From what I've heard, Barbados has been training with Rwandan military as well as South African military. I think something's going to happen at some point. We're just, it's a wait and see thing, but I think that something is definitely going to happen. One of these Caribbean islands is going to get dragged into a conflict that they probably could have avoided, but I foresee that a conflict in Africa is eventually going to drag somebody into it.
Yeah, Michael Manley actually wanted to send Jamaican troops go fighting out, in some of the African liberation wars. It didn't actually happen, but
they got rid of him though, right? They kind of overthrew him, right?
No, he lost the 1980 election.
Oh, okay.
But
I thought that, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, there was a lot of pressure coming in from the U.S. against him. I mean, actually, it's being declassified now. Actually, the version of Edward Snowden in the 80s kind of revealed all of this. So the U.S. put up kind of like secret blockade on Jamaica to make the grain prices high. So people kind of get pissed off and pulled him out of power. And they were rigging the election, all kinds of stuff. And the head of the CIA in Jamaica, when they found out his home got shot up, there's a lot of subterfuge going on. But yeah, he was not a friend of the US. And then I think it broke him. And he eventually moved to the right, became friends with Ronald Reagan. But he was very revolutionary, like in the 70s.
Jamal White in the chat room says, lost to Siega. I thought he meant Sega, as in like Sega Genesis or something.
Yeah, he lost the election to Edward Siaga. He was like the US favorite, kind of more right wing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think about the role of Mexico? I was watching something interesting. It was a speech about a Mexican president, and he was highlighting the role Haiti played in the independence of Mexico. And I know that Mexico has given like a lot of Haitians asylum.
AMLO?
Yep, AMLO.
Okay.
Do you think Mexico would be willing to intervene in Haiti?
I think that's been discussed, Jay. That's been discussed a few months ago. Mexico wants to make some investments in there, as well as Cuba. They want to make some investments in there as well. And so I think from what I've heard, they want to supply electricity to Havana from here, from Mexico, into Havana, as well as intervene, have some kind of intervention in Haiti. Now, how they're going to go about doing this, I don't know. AMLO's a very ambitious person. He's very much left wing. He's very ambitious, but his term ends in 2025. They only get to serve one term in Mexico. So I think that he's making a lot of ambitious gestures, but I don't know if he's going to be able to carry out a lot of it. He's going to be in the BRICS in August. He's going to be attending, so I'll be interested in seeing how that works out for him too, because he attending the BRICS. I wonder what Washington is going to do about that. I don't think they're going to be too happy about this guy going down there. He may come back to his house all torn apart in terms of his country.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in regards to Mexico, I mean, there was discussions, just like what Mike was saying, about maybe Mexico sending or heading a intervention force on the ground. There was also El Salvador that the young guy who's on there, he said that he could intervene, but yeah, Bukele, but it's like, do they have the, because it again, is manpower and is also logistics. I don't think El Salvador has the logistics to pull some, unless, I mean, he said something like they would send troops to DR and then they would just cross the border and go to the various territories that these gangs control. The thing is, it's all about manpower because, again, Haiti's a pretty big island. I mean, when the MINUSTA, which was the UN peacekeepers, when they were in Haiti, from 2004, I think, to 2013 or 2012, it was a force of about 7,000.
Yep.
And, the gang problem was not as bad as it is now. Now these gangs are more heavily armed. They control more territory. So you're going to need a sizable force. I think in my opinion, the way I see it, you're probably going to need at least a force of at least 15 to 20,000 to really secure these areas, because these areas that these gangs control are very densely populated. So you're going to be dealing with intense urban warfare, and they are heavily armed. They're heavily armed. These are not the gangs from like 2004, 2005. Back in those days, few gang members had assault rifles. I mean, if you see the videos of these gangs, they have machine guns, they have sniper rifles, all coming from the US, obviously, and they're ready for war. They're ready for war. So if there's going to be a regional force that's going to, try to intervene in Haiti, it has to be pretty sizable. I would say 15 to 20,000. And on top of that, they would have to retrain the Haitian police. They would have to retrain the Haitian military. So it's going to be an extended period of time. I think that's why nobody, as of right now, wants to do it, because it's not going to be just like, oh, you just go in, you wipe out the gangs, and then we just get out. No, it's like you have to go in and you have to make sure this doesn't happen again. I think Mexico has, some capability, but they got their own issues with the cartels. So it's like, are they willing to send men that they would need to in their current, organized crime issues? Same thing with Jamaica too. Jamaica has the same issues as well, and
Exactly.
DR. Like they can't just send troops because their own countries are pretty fragile. So that's the other.
But
issue.
they don't use the military to police their countries. They
Yeah, in
have
Jamaica they do.
Say that again.
They do in Jamaica.
They
Yeah,
do
in
what?
Jamaica they do.
Yeah, they do use the military as kind of a police force, which is
Yeah,
problematic. But
I thought that was only when it's a state of emergency, not an actual.
well, it's constantly in state of emergency.
Right.
So, like if you drive around Jamaica, for example, you'll see certain neighborhoods, you'll see troops like patrolling.
Right.
They perform like roadblocks, check for weapons, things like that. Because sometimes like Zoe was saying, in Jamaica, it's the same thing. Sometimes the gangs have more firepower than the police. So,
Right.
only the military is equipped.
Yeah, there's a lot of arms trafficking going on in the Caribbean. I think that's kind of the fear that at least Barbados has, is that you have these armed groups running around. You may. But actually, let me pull that article up. That's actually a really good point. Let me pull this up real quick. It'll be the last article before we pull out of here.
But while you pull it up, Zoe, it's interesting. The side of Jamaica that's really close to Haiti. One of my buddies is from there, and he's telling me there's a bunch of Haitians that nobody knows where they came from, just kind of chilling, moved in, showing up. Very interesting.
Yeah, and the thing is, a lot of the gangs in Haiti, they have ties with the gangs in Jamaica. So there's this rumor that goes on in Haiti. A lot of the gangs in Haiti and Jamaica, they go back and forth. Like they,
Yeah,
like
it's
one of the
well
times,
known in Jamaica.
yeah,
The guns for drugs trade.
yeah, like there's a current operation against one of the big gangs in Haiti, Ezo. There was rumors saying that his plan was like, if the police got too close, because they were getting real close to him and they were killing a lot of his men, the Haitian police. The rumor was that he was going to flee to Jamaica and then go from Jamaica to Colombia, like because he already had ties down there, he already had connections. So there's like this back and forth. Like unfortunately, a lot of these gangs, if things get too hot for them in Haiti, they probably think like, okay, let me just go hide in Jamaica, and when the heat dies down, maybe I could go back to Haiti, or I could just stay chilling, which creates another problem, because that's the last thing Jamaica needs, because you guys have your own gang issues. You don't want more gangs, from outside come pouring into your lands, and it becomes very problematic.
Yeah. Yeah, this is from St. Lucia Loop News. Gun trafficking in focus after regional meeting with U.S. Vice President. This is last week. St. Lucia stands to benefit from the outcome of a recent meeting between Caribbean leaders and the United States Vice President Kamala Harris, which concluded in Nassau, Bahamas on June 8th, 2023. Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre, who represented St. Lucia at the meeting, made it clear that addressing the proliferation of firearms from the U.S. into St. Lucia was a top priority for him. To foster shared prosperity and security, and recognizing the close ties between the United States and the Caribbean nations, Vice President Harris announced several new initiatives. Among them, addressing security and firearms trafficking, enhancing diplomatic presence in the Eastern Caribbean, implementing the U.S. Caribbean Partnership to address the climate crisis 2030, and addressing the crisis in Haiti. The Department of State will continue a regional forensics accreditation project to assist in bringing Caribbean forensic capabilities up to international standards. This project will benefit St. Lucia and the wider Caribbean region. In addition to continuing to helping forensic labs in the Bahamas and Dominican Republic, the U.S. will help set up a regional forensic center of excellence in St. Lucia. The project will help gather forensic evidence that is timely, accurate, and admissible. This will help crime investigations and prosecutions improve efficiency and cut down on the number of cases waiting to be heard. The Biden-Harris administration is dedicated to stopping gun trafficking in the Caribbean by stopping illegal shipments of guns and ammunition and holding criminals accountable and bringing them to justice. To help with this, the Department of Justice, DOJ, will name an experienced DOJ lawyer to be the coordinator for Caribbean firearms prosecutions. The creation of this position will bring attention to this important problem and help carry out the provisions of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which included new federal criminal provisions on gun trafficking and straw purchases. Also, the Department of Justice is helping the recently set up Regional Crime Gun Intelligence Unit, CGIU, in Trinidad and Tobago. This unit helps regional and international law enforcement agencies work together, such as the Caribbean Community Implementation Agency for Crime and Security, and U.S. agencies like the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, Customs, and Border Protection. The CGIU will meet important training needs for firearms investigations in the Caribbean. It will also help our Caribbean partner nations solve gun-related crime cases, which will deter gun crime in the area and bring criminals to justice. The CGIU will teach people how to gather, manage, and analyze information about crime guns in real time, and it will encourage international law enforcement partners to share information. This is going to be interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of intervention on the United States behalf in terms of ATF going into these countries.
Yeah, the ATF actually has an office in Jamaica.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember. I remember during the Syria conflict, you had a lot of Trinidadians traveling to Syria to fight.
I mean, mercenaries or
yeah, well, not
Well, I think
necessarily
Muslims.
mercenaries. Yeah, they're Muslim.
Because,
oh,
yeah,
okay,
because didn't Trinidad have like an uprising, like I think it was in the 90s or something? I don't know.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah, the Sheikh, he shot the prime minister.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
But
weird that he's not in prison, but
yeah, I don't get the Caribbean, man. Some weird things always happen.
yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, the one point I was gonna make is that I think the U.S. is definitely going to step in. I mean, I read a report that arms trafficking the last couple of years have increased in the Caribbean. Like a lot of American guns are showing up in Haiti, DR, Jamaica, Trinidad. Like a lot of these weapons are showing up, and it's becoming a problem. And the U.S., although the U.S. has ignored the Caribbean for so long, they realize like this could be their soft underbelly. They can't let it, get out of control. So, I mean, there's one thing they could do. I mean, have the Coast Guard, be more present in the Caribbean Sea. I mean, the way that
they already do that. They already do that.
But I don't know how these guns are getting into Haiti. Like, Mike, it's ridiculous.
Oh, they put them in bags of rice, put them in, shipping containers. There's a whole lot of ways that they, submarines, they ferry these things around. And so the problem is getting it into the United States is difficult, but getting them into Caribbean islands, that's a lot more easier because they just lack the sophistication at that level. And I think that's why they
yeah. And then I was gonna say too, well, the other problem you have obviously, and then if you have these guns that are sneaking in, you're threatening, you're undermining the rule of law essentially, because essentially the role of your government is to have a monopoly on force. And if you have governments that, where you can have your gang problem, if you have gangs who can get as much firepower in where they at least have rival the government or have some level of vis-a-vis with the government, that's how you kind of get the situation in Haiti, Mexico, the instability you see there.
Yeah, because in Haiti, uh, these gangs they rule outside the government. Like the territory they control, the gang boss, whether it's Ezo or Barbecue or all these others, they're the judge, they're the jury, and they're the executioner. They rule these areas, and the police and the military are ineffective. They can't, they can't enter these areas, and it's not a good look for the United States that you are this country that's all about rule of law, but then in your backyard you have a serious security problem. So I mean, hopefully they take it seriously because I think the problem with the United States is like it's so focused, and I get it because it's the world superpower. They're focused on the Mid East, they focus in East Asia, Eastern Europe, but they kind of overlook what goes on in his backyard. And I think now the United States is like realize, oh shit, like this thing that's in Haiti is real serious. But I think the reason why they're not jumping in to intervene is you know the history,
Yep.
the optics of it, the optics of it politically, how it'll look. Um, because I don't know how would U.S. citizens react to if a U.S. soldier gets killed in Haiti by a gang. Like there's that issue, and also, resources. Do they want to expend that amount of resources? That's why they kind of like say, hey, Canada, maybe you could do something, but Canada's like, well, we don't have the logistic arm like you do, so
No,
we'll try to do it this way. So
well,
yeah.
I was gonna say one
I,
person I was talking to when it happened, and you had the crisis there. They were saying the French should do something. Um, that basically, if the U.S. wants to take that posture, that the French have more of a. It makes more sense just because of the history there, and the language, the shared language and shared history for the French to be more involved. But obviously, that's a strange history as well.
Yeah.
I will say though, just one point. I think it's a little different in some of the other islands versus Haiti, because I think, for example, in Jamaica, a lot of this is just lack of action, incompetence on the government's part. Because last year there was a famous incident. The FBI intercepted like 100 Glucks going to Montego Bay. They inspected them, repackaged them, called the Jamaican authorities and said, hey, 100 Glucks are in some rice barrel. And when they got to Jamaica, they're like, oh, we must have missed it or something like that, even though they gave them the intel. Like, it's just, I don't know, man. Because guess what? If a gang member touches one tourist, oh my God, they know they can't do that. The government's still firmly in control. Exhibit B, the incursion into Tivoli Gardens, when heavily armed gangsters had to actually go up against the military. I mean, they wiped the floor with them. There's no match, even without sniper rifles, all that. I mean, they go up against special forces, it's over.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of corruption. There's only so much the U.S. can do. I mean, when you have, they have guns showing up at the wharf. They don't even follow the people collecting the guns. It's ridiculous, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say too, it's not happening here, but I actually saw something on Vice too. You actually, it is happening, I believe, in Brazil. You have some far right wing who are actually lobbying for gun rights in some of these countries. Brazil is one where they're trying to push for a constitutional right for guns as far as in the society. And you have basically the gun lobby and NRA who's behind all this. And I don't think that's happening in Haiti, obviously, but that's something to keep an eye on too. If that trend continues, and if that's successful in somewhere like Brazil, sort of turning it almost into America in the sense of, and it's not just actually lobbying, it's propaganda as well too. A lot of cultural wars going into it as well. But if that gun culture gets exported across the world, that could lead to more issues as well. Especially
it's a problem in Jamaica.
Yeah, especially in some of these countries that aren't as stable as the United States.
Yeah, I
I mean,
mean,
this,
to take for example, in Haiti, the past 2, 3 months, there's been this movement called Bois Calais, where it's been the people rising up because the gangs have committed so many atrocities that now they have to take matters into their own hands. They've uh, created like these, self-defense groups, armed with, machetes and some handguns. And if you're a gang member, they chop you up, they kill you because they said like, okay, if the government's not doing anything, and the Haitian government said this months ago, like it's up to the people to defend themselves. Basically, that's what they dead ass said. They said, okay, well, there's nothing we can do. You gotta figure out your own self-defense. So the people are like, all right, bet we're gonna take matters into our own hands. And it's reached that point because if the government fails to make the people safe, then the people are going to take, the matters into their own hands. And there's this, it's not really a movement like how it is in Brazil, but there's this belief in Haiti, like, well, if these gangs have guns, then we should get guns too, because the police are not doing nothing. They either corrupt or they have low morale. They don't even want to risk their life to, take on these gangs.
Yeah. Let me close it out from here, man. Thank you all for joining us. Please hit the like button on the way out and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from